Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 28th, 2023 City Council Successor Agency regularly scheduled meeting at 7 p.m. And could I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
Vice Mayor Meyer.
Here.
Councilmember Orlemans.
Here.
Councilmember Pearson.
Here.
Mayor Bryant.
Here. And if you could join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will open public comments, and I'll turn it to you, Margaret.
We'll take public comments in the council chambers, followed by Zoom comments. If you're in person, please file a speaker card with the city clerk. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand to speak under public comments. At this time, the public is permitted to address the city council on items that are not on the agenda. Items listed under presentations, informational reports are on the consent calendar. Requests for future agenda items, new request. Please save your comments for any other items that are on the agenda for that part of the meeting. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. I received no written public comments that were submitted prior to the meeting for this portion of the comments. While we encourage your comments, state law prevents the city council from discussing items that are not on their meeting agenda, and if appropriate, staff will follow up with them directly. I do have 2 in-person speaker cards. The first is from Mika.
Good evening, Council. I'm here to show support for the City Council, Brentwood City Council, to write a letter in support of AB 23. My support is based on my work experience of almost 3 decades in the criminal justice system and my current employer working in private security in the retail business. Prior to taking this position, I had no idea how severe the problem was until after a few weeks of working in the job. I personally call it an epidemic. I've seen both parents or parents with their kids or kids, teenagers, a lot of times groups of them, several, like in a collaboration, they come in the store, and how they go about, they go as far as doing things like texting inside the store, letting the whoever they're working with know where the security's at, or which employees are watching, or which door they can get outside the door. So when they're collaborating and trying to do this, it's just like sizing up a let's just say if you're working in the prison system, you try to size, if the offenders are inside the jail and they're trying to collaborate and, pass contraband and stuff like that. That's kind of the idea of what they do in the store. So trying to get out several bags, hand baskets, or a handful of items or a cart of food. And then I'm really surprised with some of the behavior that I deal with and the employees deal with. And yes, a lot of it is not reported because the management in the store, they're trying to do their job and they know that the police can't do nothing. This is what a lot of the customers say when this is some of the examples. What are you going to do to me? Nothing when I'm trying to make a recovery. I personally have been told, and other people, people pulling up their shirt, brandishing a weapon, a handgun. That hasn't happened to me personally. However, I've been told I'm going to come back and F you up. But there's a lot of us that we have guts. We go there, we do our job, we're trying to recover. But behind the scenes, I don't have a lot of time left. There's a lot of things that are not reported. So thanks for passing that and writing that letter. Hopefully we can get some other cities in the county on board.
The speaker's timer has expired. Thank you. The next speaker is Denise Duran, followed by Holly Bishop.
Good evening, City Council member and city officials. It's good to see you here this evening. My name is Denise Duran. I am the president of the Brentwood Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to come in and say thank you so much for being so visible at our events. It is really very special to see the engagement and interaction at our community's events. Just to touch on a few. We wanted to thank Councilmember Orleman for being present at our Brentwood Power Network. That is an event, or it's a service that the Chamber offers business owners to connect and get to know each other. And so how wonderful to be able to connect with our city council members. We had a ribbon cutting at Angry Chicks, and we want to thank city officials for supporting that so beautifully. And also, thank you to those who attempted to attend and then saw, wow, this is a really well-received event with over 2,000 people at that ribbon cutting. And we also want to just continue to support this engagement for all city officials, for city council members to know that we are a welcoming and open environment to connect, to help us introduce you as well to the business community, because when we're working together, we all work better for each other and for this community. So we do have an upcoming mixer. It will be on the 16th, and it's going to be back at Silvergate. So what a wonderful way to, again, connect our business community as well as residents. And people want to get to know our city officials. It makes them feel like they actually have additional access. And then we also have an upcoming mixer in April on the 20th at a brand new business called Hotworks, where you can be healthy and do hot cycling, and it'll be incredible. You'll burn thousands of calories. So for those who are interested in learning more about these amazing businesses that are coming here to Brentwood, the Chamber once again says thank you so much for being willing to connect and to help enhance and integrate all the different areas of our beautiful community. So that will conclude, and thank you again.
The next speaker is Holly Bishop.
The journey with the city regarding water personally started for me in 2021 when I emailed the city about benzene, glyphosate, and chromium-6 levels, which was not present in the yearly annual water quality report. It was essential that I have safe drinking water for my son. I asked the city of Brentwood to test chromium-6 separately and yearly so that the residents of Brentwood can be informed on what those levels are. Cost for that yearly would only be a couple $100s, I believe. Miki has a wonderful report, and the city of Brentwood has always abided by what the state recommends, even going above and beyond. But there comes a time when the state is negligent to handle a problem, and the chromium-6 is $1 trillion problem. They are ignoring it, and litigation on this matter has been ongoing since 2014. Council, you have the power to make this right for our city. Here's what Miki's report doesn't report on because he goes by the state, and respectfully so. The levels of Hinckley, where those people got stomach cancer, was 1.16 to 20. And the state says the total chromium is okay at 50. That's genocide if the total chromium is chromium-6. We can even talk about how states continue to neglect its problems. The train derailment in Ohio is one. Did you know the MSDS specifically states not to light vinyl chloride on fire? If you do, it makes phosgene, which was used in World War I as chemical warfare. But we did just that on our own soil, and they're still saying it's safe. Brentwood meets all health goals accept the health goal of 0.02 chromium-6 on our wells. In Miki's report, it speaks of a level of 10 parts per billion, which would add a risk of 1 in 2,000 developing council. Council, you are all parents. Imagine your child being the 1 in 2,000, and you could have done something about it. Only 20% of our water is from wells. The surface water or delta water doesn't have high chromium-6. I'm asking to use the wells as an emergency backup. Don't pipe that water to residents. Leave them for emergencies only. This will result in the need to expand our water treatment, which we're already doing for our ever-growing city. We also need to do something about our recycled water, which we're using as irrigation. This water has a chromium-6, and we water our parks with that. Chromium-6 cannot be removed once applied. This can be an issue for future generations. The people of Hinckley cannot sell their property, and they want out. And the same could go for Brentwood if we continue to add chromium-6 to our soil. We need to do something with our recycled water as well. There are polymers to convert Chrom-6 to Chrom-3, which is the healthy one. I'm asking you for 3 things. Test Chromium-6 yearly, shut off the wells used as a backup, and remove Chrom-6 from recycled irrigated water. On a side note, 6% of the residents of Hinckley got stomach cancer. That number can even be more, but they reached a court settlement. This would differ from the 1 in 2,000, which the city's report refers to. Miki, you did a wonderful job, I just have to say.
The speaker's timer has expired. The next speaker is Danny Dorman.
Okay. Good evening, all. I love this city. 2 weeks ago, I placed my faith and trust in our system. Whether it was my naivete, and let me tell you, that was a tough word to say, complete breakdown in common sense from our non-elected leaders, or my understanding of what is considered personal and confidential, only to be mistaken. The point is moot. I've let the parties know that my love for this city is greater than any dispute. However, I hope lessons are learned by this city. And granted, for those listening, you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, and that's actually a good thing. I'm not fully versed in the Brown Act, nor am I fully versed in what information can be communicated between the 3 branches of local government, the council, the city attorney, and the chief. That said, there needs to be something to give my neighbors a sense of, I can report something to the council. I can get an opinion from the chief. I can ensure I don't put my city at risk if I speak to the city attorney. Otherwise, how can we trust you? I hope this is the last time I make this about me, because it's not. This particular couple of weeks, I may have been the face of this thing, but this is something that could happen and maybe already has happened to others. And with the remaining time I have left, Shay, kindred at Balfour. There are no mailboxes there. Seniors have to travel to our post office downtown. When will they do the decent thing and build it? They have an HOA. People go to the HOA. Hey, when are we getting our clubhouse, which is part of the mailbox system? Hey, to be honest, just put up a box for the mailboxes. That's the problem with Shay. They say one thing, they do another, and sometimes that doing is nothing. So we have, for example, my 86-year-old mother-in-law who has to go downtown, stand in line to get her mail. So, Shay, please do something. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional in-person speaker cards. I do have 2 hands raised on Zoom. I'll call on Glenda Paca, followed by Carolina Villaseca. Glenda, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the City Council. My name is Glenda Paha, and on behalf of the Advisory Council on Aging and the Contra Costa Area Agency on Aging, I'd like to publicly thank Arthur Kee, who you will be honoring later tonight, for his service to not only the City of Brentwood, but to Contra Costa County as a whole. His knowledge, commitment, and humor will be greatly missed by all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Carolina Villaseca. Carolina, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll give you back the gift of time. Good evening, City Council members. I just wanted to let you know that we saw an incredible act of determination at the planning meeting last week. I was watching the planning meeting and I saw 4 chairs filled and 1 chair open, and the chair open belonged to Dr. Roberts. And I thought, oh my goodness, why isn't she there? Turns out she was in the hospital and she zoomed in for the meeting. She was nominated as chair. She was elected 5-0. But I just think that, you know, it takes real gumption to be so dedicated to the city of Brentwood that you actually zoom in from your hospital bed and before every vote have to confirm that, no, you're alone in the room. There's nobody over the age of 18. And for every single vote that she took. So I just wanted you guys just to let you know, because I thought that was amazing. And it was just something very memorable. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised in Zoom and no additional speaker cards.
Thank you. At this time, we will close public comments and we will move into presentations, item A1. And I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Meyer also to join me at the front. And if we could also have Mrs. Barbara Kee join us up at the front as well. Mrs. Kee, thank you so much for joining us tonight. At this time, I will turn it over to our Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Kee, for joining us this evening. We heard about the wonderful contributions of your husband, Arthur, from Glenda Paha through the Area Agency on Aging. Mr. Kee was a volunteer with the Advisory Council on Aging to the Area Agency on Aging for 20 years, if I recall. Maybe 18. I think it was pretty high. But I hear wonderful things about his sense of humor, his dedication, his fiddling, evidently a wonderful musician. Glenda wrote to us and asked us to honor him tonight. And so we'd like to present you with this proclamation. Whereas Arthur Arlen Kee, a Brentwood resident and city representative, passed away on December 26th, 2022 at the age of 89. And whereas Arthur was born in Vineyard, Texas, and at a young age learned to play the fiddle, which sparked his love for music. And whereas Arthur joined the Navy, and after this service, he moved to California and began his career in city planning. And whereas he met his wife, Barbara, while working for the city of Campbell, Arthur had 2 children from a prior marriage, John and Jenny, and a stepson, Brian, from his marriage to Barbara. And whereas after a career in city planning that spanned 29 years and included work for the city of Sunnyvale and the city of Campbell, Arthur Kee retired as planning director. And whereas after retiring, in addition to family activities and boating, Arthur enjoyed traveling to play music with friends, competed and won trophies for fiddle in state and national contests, including a first place title in the 2005 National Old Time Fiddlers Senior Contest. Whereas even during retirement, Arthur Kee, an 18-year Brentwood resident, continued his pursuit of public service and his desire to participate in making positive changes among senior citizens through a volunteer position. He was appointed as Brentwood's local committee representative on the Advisory Council on Aging. And whereas family, friends, and professional acquaintances described Arthur as kind, gentle, honorable, and fun, Now therefore it be proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Brentwood hereby recognize the life and public service of Arthur Kee and ask that the residents join the city in providing our deepest condolences to the Kee family on the loss of their husband, father, and grandfather, dated this 28th of February, 2023. Thank you. I wish I could have met him.
Mrs. Kee, thank you so much for loaning your husband to our community. Until the Vice Mayor read that, I had forgotten, had the opportunity to have a conversation with him at one of the events at the Senior Center a few years ago, and the man that was standing next to him could not quit bragging on him enough for your husband to say, please, his input and his care for our community was greatly appreciated by the community, and we thank you very much. So thank you. Would you like to say something?
Other than he deeply enjoyed his service to the community and looking for solutions for the aging population challenge for him.
Well, thank you so much. We much appreciate your sacrifice and dedication to our community to make us a better place to live. Thank you so much. At this time, we will move into informational reports from council members, committees, liaisons, and staff. And this week, or this meeting, I will start to my left. Councilman Orlemans.
Thank you. On the day after the last council meeting, my wife and I attended the Contra Costa County Fire District Academy graduation for class number 58. It was an amazing event over in Walnut Creek at the Lesher Center. I think there were 28 recruits that had their new badges pinned on by either family members or significant others. And they all headed out the next day to start their training in the field at our local fire stations. Let's see, I attended the grand opening of Angry Chicks. What a crowd. They did a great job. The staff at Angry Chicks did a phenomenal job controlling that crowd. They offered to let me go in, and there wasn't a prayer I was cutting in front of 2,000 people. So I just, thank you, I walked out. But it was a great event to see that many people for a brand new opening of a business. I got to watch the Planning Commission meeting where Dr. Roberts attended from the hospital bed. It was an amazing feat watching her do that meeting, run that meeting, or get elected as the commissioner on that meeting from a hospital bed. It was awesome. The Chamber of Commerce Power Network Zoom meeting, we're a bunch of business owners getting together to talk about how their businesses are working. And then I attended the Tri-Delta Transit board meeting. It was really nice getting together with a bunch of dignitaries or council members from other parts of the county. And I learned that, March 18th is Transit Driver Appreciation Day, but it'll be celebrated on the 16th because I guess the 18th is a weekend or something. So they're going to celebrate it on the 16th. And then we attended the Lions Club Crab Feed. What a great event. Good time had by all, great food, a lot of fun people. So very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Met with the new district director for State Senator Steve Glazer and had some discussions around homelessness and local control, a lot of very interesting topics. Met with the current president of the Brentwood Chamber in part to discuss retail theft and some relationships and new businesses coming to town. Attended the Lions Crab Feed to benefit the Lions Center for the Blind. Attended the Choice in Aging fundraiser event to help find resources to help older adults age in their setting of place. Attended the John Marsh Historic Trust board meeting as council liaison. Unfortunately, I will not be able to continue in that role as their regular meeting is on the same exact time as a meeting I have standing ongoing for work. So that will be coming to a future agenda so that we can find another council liaison for that. Attended the Special Land Use and Development Committee meeting. I also watched the Planning Commission meeting with Dr. Roberts, zooming in from the hospital. That was absolutely amazing. Very impressed by the work that they're doing as a group. I was interviewed as part of a Dishing with Debbie podcast, which if anybody wants to watch, it's on my council Facebook page. Attended a California License for Local Electeds presentation and Q&A with the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta. It was mainly focused on housing and RENA numbers, et cetera. And then also attended a presentation by Hija del Campo, where they went over what they'd been accomplishing in the past few years since they started, and which is incredible, the work that they're doing, and they're expanding their reach even more. So really great work there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Mendoza.
Hello. Since the last time I met, attended a Cal Cities speaker series with Paul Mitchell, who does all of the data around elections. And if you know me, you know I love data. Informational meeting for our Neighborhood Voices, the initiative to take back local control. Also met with Carrie Reiser from the Chamber of Commerce, had coffee with her. Presentation also with Hijas del Campo, now helping over 300 plus families, along with the Lions and other local volunteers. So thank you, Lions, for that. Planning Commission meeting, again, I don't think enough of us can say anything about Anita Roberts that night. It was insane that she did it from her hospital bed. Attended the local electeds meeting, we call it Cali. So we had two of those. The first one was about SB 423, which is the initiative they want to pass through the legislators right now, which basically takes away all of our control if we don't build half of what they've mandated through the 6th cycle, which would be in 4 years. So there'd be kind of no point for us after that. And you would have no say in what gets built in your backyard, so someone could tear something down and build like a little mini apartment complex. Had a call with the president of Cal Cities, the league. We reviewed the California Business Roundtable, SB 423, and our Neighborhood Voices, along with the SB 423 around shoplifting. Attended the Land Use and Economic Development meeting. Supported the Lions at their crab feed. Funny thing there is I ran into someone my husband and I worked with over 30 years ago, and someone my mom made bridesmaids dresses for 30 years ago. So I haven't seen those people in over 30 years. That was kind of crazy. Had a call. So we also had the call with Rob Bonta. I attended that as well and was able to present to him. He has actually called one of his agencies now a strike force that's going to come after cities. I told him I was very unhappy with the word strike force, considering what is happening to a lot of council members nowadays and their safety. He said he would look at finding a new name for that. Attended the leadership roundtable today, attended Livable California last Saturday, where they reviewed SB 423 in detail with some analysis, and attended the Planning Commission special meeting tonight.
Councilperson Pearson. Boy, that's a tongue twister.
Good afternoon, everyone. I had was invited to lunch with the mayor of Antioch to discuss our issues with homelessness, our joint issues, and some other issues that we jointly have in our cities. I did receive several emails that I responded to and phone calls. One of them, I wanted to make sure I addressed them openly during this time. I responded to emails where there were some concerns for the construction being built on the Big Basin and Smith Road. Some residents were concerned about what that was. And so I wanted to reassure them that that was a new school that is being built by Brentwood Unified School District, with the entry being on Smith Road. If you have any more questions, please reach out to me, or you can contact our school district. Also, I received emails about what is the process to dedicating a soccer field in our area that's going to come up. And so we were able to get forms to that community member. They want to dedicate that. I think Liberty High School wants to dedicate a soccer field specifically to a community member. received some other emails and need to return a call about Dolphin Park. I think there's some residents who have issues or want to discuss Dolphin Park some more, which is in my district, but also in the city of Brentwood altogether. Also, I purchased a ticket to the Lion Cup crab feed, but unfortunately I couldn't make it due to a sick child, but I'm so happy. I heard it was an amazing event, and hopefully I get to show up and make it to the next one, but happy to have supported. And then I was able to watch tonight's Planning Commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Since the last council meeting, the first week I was actually out of the area with no cellular service or way to be contacted. So if you called me 2 weeks ago, that entire week, I apologize for not being able to expeditiously return your call. But there were lots of animals around, so that, but in this last week, I attended a Red Cross blood drive that was very, very well attended for one of the families of our Brentwood Police Department. I attended the Tri-Delta meeting, and Councilman Orlemans has already reported out on that. I attended 3 ECRFA meetings. Now, ECRFA is the East Contra Costa Regional Finance and Fee Authority. That's a big word, combination of words that means it's the body for Contra Costa County that controls the funding for roads. And I have some very, very exciting news for our community. And that is that for many years, one of the top priorities has been for the city of Brentwood to find a way to get Sand Creek Road to connect to Deer Valley Road as a life-saving measure at least, and to help alleviate some of the traffic between here, Lone Tree, and Antioch. That process required a reprioritization of the James Donnellan Road in Antioch. And it seemed to be a pretty long shot, but all of the cities worked together to make that happen. And we voted and got passed unanimously, which it takes a unanimous vote to get it done, to reprioritize Sand Creek from Brentwood to Deer Valley Road. Sand Creek is built and completed right now from Deer Valley Road to Hydorn Road at our city limits. And now we have received the funding and the okay and the reprioritization for Brentwood to connect that. So shortly we will have access to be able to drive Sand Creek all the way to Deer Valley. That should cut approximately 10 minutes off of a run to the hospital from Brentwood. So that's really good news. Also, I met with Congressman Desaulnier, who is our new congressman. He was very, very generous with his time, and we got to speak about some things that are Brentwood priorities and East County priorities. And he made a long list and promised that we could call him and talk anytime. And so I know where his office is. It's really close. And he's going to be seeing us quite often. But he has always done great work in this region, so we appreciate his work. Also, I had a Habitat Conservancy meeting, and that's all I have to report at this time. At this time, we're going to go to consent calendar. Do I have a motion for consent calendar?
I make a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous, passes. Moving into public hearings, item D1, a resolution regarding amendments to the 2022-23.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I would like to request that, I'd like to request that we move item E2, Dear Reg update, to earlier in the meeting. I believe we're going to have some public comments and responses and attendees interested in that topic, and I think that should come forward a bit.
If that is okay
Well,
with
that's
City
appropriate.
Council,
Yeah.
we can, okay, we will move then to item E2, The item is to hear an informational update for the Deer Ridge Frontage Landscaping Improvements Project. And staff.
Buttons everywhere. Green light, I'm good to go. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. As promised at the January 24th City Council meeting, staff is here tonight to provide an update and informational report on the Deer Ridge Landscape Frontage Project. From the staff report, we have three main topics to discuss or to talk about. The one being the landscape improvement piece of the project. Number two would be the PG&E service to site one. And finally, the fountain retrofit. For the landscape improvement piece, I believe in your packet you should have the conceptual design that was submitted from Gates and Associates. They're the landscape architect working with BKF engineers on this project. Between resident input and staff input, I believe Gates was able to put a pretty substantial upgrade on their original design that was originally submitted with a submittal of the CIP. Once the final plan is presented to staff, we'll be able to begin construction, planting and whatnot of the front entrance piece. Staff has already began prepping the site. So again, as soon as we have the final plan, we'll be able to proceed with the planting, which is extremely similar to that conceptual, but we'll get exact plant counts and such with the final plan. We anticipate, assuming we get the plans back within the next week, the project should be complete. The planting part of the project should be complete by the end of March, barring the weather, what it's doing may put it off a little bit, but that's still the target date, is to finish by the end of March for the landscape piece. The PG&E service to the site, we're still working with their original estimate of $89,000. So city staff, along with PG&E reps, and when I say city staff, I mean our legal and our risk management teams are still reviewing the contract prior to finalizing and hopefully coming back with that final contract at that April 11th meeting. Also at that 11th meeting, we look to bring, when I say we, staff looks to present the fountain retrofit contract. Unfortunately, the initial bids came back over $60,000 at roughly $90,000. And what that does is force us to go out to bid for the project because it exceeds the $60,000 threshold to become a project that needs to go out to bid. So regardless, as we speak, the project's out to bid. We're anticipating March 23rd to receive the bids. We're so roughly 3 weeks away, we'll receive the bids. And at that point, we'll look to bring the contract, assuming everything goes right up to that point, we look to bring that contract back to council at the April 11th meeting as well. I'm available for any questions the council may have.
Thank you. Erin, are there any clarifying questions of staff?
I do have a few, thank you. One of the major questions I've been hearing from residents is about the PG&E access. I know that at one point there was PG&E there at the fountain. Someone else asked about a grid, whether it was still part of the grid from the clubhouse. And the question is, why is it as much as it is, considering is there still any activity there that's
no, excellent question. That's what we've been fighting from the beginning is why. Regardless, the initial electrical supply for those fountains is substantially inside the property line. So it sits on the property at what would be the old lake, which is probably a lake again, but the pond's down there. So that electrical service could not be turned over to us. It resides on private property. So therefore the city was required to get a new service. There's nothing out there that meets the criteria for these pumps. The street lights and whatnot work on a separate circuit. I'm not an electrical engineer, so I can't get into the details, but regardless, so we needed to actually we needed to have PG&E actually provide a brand new service to that area. So we could not use any of the existing because we didn't have authorization to use it.
Thank you. And if I'm understanding correctly, there is not any fiscal impact to residents. They are not going to be asked to pay anything additional, and the impact fiscally is going to be on the city, correct?
Correct. At this point of the project, there's still 131,000 remaining from the original project. So we're anticipating utilizing that 131, which already includes the landscape upgrade. Obviously, the number's coming in a little higher. If we do need to come back for any additional funding, it would come from the general fund and not the Landscape and Lighting Assessment District that was formed in 21-1.
Great, and thank you for that. And my final question would be around the timeline, and I know that's a little hard to predict right now. Can you give a guesstimate about when the fountain might be complete and when the landscaping might be complete?
No, absolutely. Landscaping, we're targeting the end of March, granted a couple weeks depending on weather, but we're still looking for March. The fountains, once the contract is, assuming it gets awarded at that April 11th meeting, we can immediately begin scheduling that work. So depending on parts and whatnot, a couple month period to get the fountain up and running.
Okay, and actually one last one is around the upgraded planting palette for color and aesthetics. That was, if I'm again understanding correctly, that was based on resident feedback?
Taking into account some resident feedback, because we also had some plants that absolutely would not work, but based on public input, staff's expertise, and the landscape architect, which is a popular or a reputable firm, and Gates and Associates, and taking into account the drought requirements as well, is where that plant palette came from.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now.
I have one question. Good afternoon. One of my questions was, and it kind of spurred up before and after you gave the dates, if the landscaping is happening to be completed in March and the fountain afterwards, will the landscape be damaged? I mean, will the landscape be damaged by the placement of the fountain thereafter?
No, it will not. Most of the work can be performed from behind the feature, and regardless, there'll be space in front with plenty of room to work on the fountain. So no, the landscape will be fine.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if there are no further clarifying questions of staff, at this time we will open public comments. Margaret?
If you're in person, please file a speaker card with the form provided on the counter at the back of the chambers. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. 2 written comments were submitted from Bobby Jurisic and Victoria Sandberg prior to the 3 p.m. deadline, and these comments will be posted on the city's website. And I do have one hand raised. I'll go ahead and start with Rod. Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. I'm just speaking as a citizen tonight. I just wanted to thank the City Council for moving forward with this. I think a lot of people are, I know I am, kind of shocked at some of the cost overruns. The PG&E thing, thank you so much for getting an explanation for that. I won't even bother asking you if you asked Roberto Brudical if you could, get an easement to his property, because I know the answer. But be that as it may, I'm really looking forward to seeing it, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised.
Thank you. At this time, then, we will close public comments, move into council discussion.
I just want to say, I think it looks great. This has been a long time coming. I mean, this was Karen Rary's project from I think before we were on council. Yeah, so thank you to staff for everything. Thank you for, I know sometimes we're hard on the landscaping, so thank you for the plants, because I like them. But I think the residents really, really appreciate it, and I think the city appreciates it, so thank you.
I'd like to second that. I think looking at the photos that were in the agenda packet were very colorful, very sturdy looking plants. I think it's going to be a wonderful welcome home to a lot of neighbors that have been putting up with subpar conditions for a long time. So really appreciate staff's hard work on this. Thank you.
I want to say thank you as well for all the hard work and dedication. Driving that way every morning to take my kid to school. So it'd be nice to see all the colorfulness and the beauty that it used to be before we saw the desert that sprung up from the abandonment. So thank you so much.
Okay, do we have a motion on this item? Oh, it doesn't require a motion. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Aaron, staff.
Mayor, do you want to move up D2? Because I think you have a few people and ready for residents wanting to present for D, if they want to move it up. Yeah, they're like, yeah.
Well, if that's okay with council.
Absolutely.
Okay. This time then, we will go to item D2. The item is to hear and consider an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a tentative parcel map known as Trinity Estates, located at 7770 Lone Tree Way. And I'll turn to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Crystal DeCastro will be giving the presentation. Just give her a moment to get it called up. Thank you.
Okay, it's ready. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Bryan and members of the council. The following item is an appeal filed by Carmen Briones of the Planning Commission's approval of Trinity Estates. An appeal results in a new hearing in which the item is to be heard by the appellate body. Council serves as the appellate body for the Planning Commission. Therefore, this item is before you tonight. Council's consideration tonight is a review of the Planning Commission's approval of Trinity Estates. Council's decision would be based on specific findings to either uphold the Commission's decision, modify the conditions, or reverse the approval. The resolution attached to the Council report mirror the conditions the Planning Commission approved. The subject site is located at 7770 Lone Tree Way on the north side of Lone Tree Way and south of Bonnie Lane. The proposed project is a tentative map to subdivide a 5.32 acre parcel into 4 parcels and a designated remainder parcels. The applicants for Trinity Estates are Leanne and Joe Alfaro. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on January 17, 2023 to review the proposal. After closing the public hearing, and after deliberation and discussion, the Planning Commission voted 4-0 to approve the project. Then on January 27, a timely appeal was filed by Carmen Briones, the property owner, directly north of the project site. The basis of the appeal includes the following concerns as shown here on the screen. A detailed response is provided in the Council staff report, and in summary, the appeal does not address the findings or conditions of approval for the project proposed. On an unrelated and separate matter, the city received a letter today from Mrs. Briones' lawyer, which was provided to council. Council's action tonight would include the following options. If the appeal is denied, entitlements would remain in place, as they were originally approved by the Planning Commission on January 17th. The council would formally approve the project by adopting the council resolution as attached. Council may also modify conditions and adopt the modified resolution tonight as well. If upheld, the council would provide findings for the denial, and the item would return to council to formally deny the project. This concludes the presentation, and the staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Questions of staff?
I have some questions. When it comes to circulation, I haven't had this come up since I've been on council, but I know before I was on council, we would review master plan circulation plans. Do we have that for this area? What is the overall goal for the city when it comes to the circulation here?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I think I'll take that question. Yes, you are correct. We typically look at the general plan for circulation, but these are typically arterial or major thoroughfares that are identified in the general plan. This particular project is in a residential neighborhood. There are no circulation maps specifically for this particular area. That being said, I believe there are plans to connect Dahlia Drive with Bonnie Lane as part of a residential network, but there are no regional circulation plans to do significant roadway improvements in this area.
How about Kenwood? How does that work into the vision of what this is supposed to look like?
It is my understanding that Kenwood was ultimately supposed to be extended and connected to Bonnie Lane. There is a strip of land that separates the two. I believe it's owned by the irrigation district. and our conditions of approval accommodate that to the extent that the applicant cannot acquire easements over that strip of land, that they would still be able to access off of Lone Tree.
Okay. When in the appeal, and I was here for the meeting because that was the Planning Commission first meeting. So one group wants it, one group doesn't. And I think I didn't hear that the groups were able to get together and kind of come to a consensus. What is Miss Carmen Briones' ask when it comes to what happens on this road? And how does that work with the ask from the applicant? Like, how does staff make sure that we're weighing them the right way? Because she's not applying, the other one's applying. So does that take precedent because there's an application? Like, how do you make sure you're fair to everyone and the land that they own?
Crystal's looking in this direction. So the application before you is for a subdivision map. So the city's role here is to determine whether or not the application meets the requirements for a subdivision map. These neighbors may have issues between them that don't necessarily involve the city. So it's not the city's place to necessarily weigh in on every consideration between the two, but rather staff's job is to bring to the Planning Commission and now the council the application and whether or not it meets the city's standards. Does that help?
It does. I guess I just wonder, like, if I just envision myself, if I lived where Ms. Briones lives and I'm not sure if I'm speaking out of turn for them, but when I was sitting here at that meeting, I thought it wasn't necessarily the subdivision, but the circulation that was, if I'm not mistaken. And I was sitting there looking at it because I don't have the background, but this is the subdivision with no plan for a real road, which was one of the frustrating things for me before I was on council. I felt we made decisions that weren't planned out and that then became a mess later on to deal with. So I'm not understanding why we just don't, like, if we're gonna do a subdivision and we know it's 4 lots, why can't we build the circulation plan now as part of that agreement? And how does that circulation plan look like for all of the parties involved?
So I'll defer to engineering on the circulation issues. But when an application comes in, it is circulated to all of the departments that have review jurisdiction over it, and then is ultimately returned to the planning department for their analysis of whether that application meets the requirements that are set out in the code. So in this case, it was circulated to all relevant departments, including engineering, and as I said, I'll defer to Miki on that. And it was staff's determination that all requirements had been met for the city to take action. But that's your purview, right? That list of criteria. So Miki may be able to provide more information on how the circulation aspects were analyzed by staff.
Yes, thank you. So here's a good example. If Bonnie Lane was part of a master plan road, an arterial or major collector road, yes, we would. And let me back up. And if the properties along Bonnie Lane had long-term plans for development as identified in the general plan, then we would certainly work with all development or potential developers along Bonnie Lane to make sure that they either construct their fair share or construct above their fair share and get reimbursed per our feed program. But that's not the case here. This is very similar to some of the other projects where you have an old rural road. There are no master plans for major development on here. Usually you have residents that don't want to be bothered by government, that don't want to have their roads improved. And we don't see a nexus to require major improvements along Bonnie Lane based on a 4-lot subdivision.
Alexis, when it comes to RENA, what is the vision, what is the density vision for this area?
Well, it would be the zoning that's in place today. Okay. Yeah, so we have not identified this as an opportunity site to meet our RENA, if that's what you're asking. Mm-hmm. So it would just be, if it's developed, it would be reported to the state in our annual report.
but it's not a part of an opportunity site.
Yeah. Okay, well, we can discuss it during discussion, but those were my questions.
Yes, thank you. A few. One of them is through Bonnie Lane. What does the first responder access look like? Is there a chance that it could end up being a, not easy access for first responders? Basically?
So based on my review of the document that I have, Bonnie Lane, the underlying fee of Bonnie Lane is it's privately owned. So all the private property owners along Bonnie Lane on both sides of Bonnie Lane, they own the land in fee. However, the documents that we have also show that there is a public easement over Bonnie Lane that provides public access. So if you were to drive along Bonnie Lane, you'll see that there are mailboxes, so the USPS can provide mail service. Our garbage trucks use Bonnie Lane, fire trucks, police, they all can use Bonnie Lane, pizza delivery can use Bonnie Lane, and the applicant and their subdivision, they can use Bonnie Lane. So it's my understanding, it's my opinion that based on the information I have that there is public access on Bonnie Lane, even though the underlying fee is privately owned.
So have there been improvements made by the residents and investments made in that area?
I'm not aware of any unless anyone else in staff is aware of any.
Okay. What is the standard practice for a road becoming city maintained instead of private? And is that ever seen down the future for this?
Typically, I'm trying to think of a good example. So before we accept a road, they have to comply with our standards, our city standards. So typically in this neighborhood, it's probably 2 lanes, probably parking, sidewalk, landscaping, things of that nature.
Okay. And is there any plans down the road for this one becoming a public?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the public notice of the council meeting, the planning commission meeting, the sign placement. Is there someone who can talk a little about that?
Yes, Polly can address your questions. We follow the state and our city regulations. 10 days before the meeting, we had it posted, and we had an on-site notice posted on the public facing the public right away on Lone Tree. The applicant also put one up on Bonnie Lane. The notice was sent out within a 300-foot radius from the project site. It was also published in the newspaper as well.
So the placement of the sign that in the agenda packet was saying was not placed in a way that was very visible. Who placed that sign?
So it was placed in a location that was visible. Okay. The week before the meeting where the sign was up, it was that same week in January where we were raked with storms and winds. So the sign may have fell down. I don't know completely, but it fell. We told the applicant when it was safe to do so, she needed to prop it back up, which she did.
Okay. I have some other questions. I'm trying to figure out if I should ask them now or later. I'm imagining we're going to have some public comment on this. So I think I'm going to reserve other questions until after that. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further clarification questions of staff at this time? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I will now open the public hearing. Margaret?
At this time, the public is permitted to address the City Council. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, except for the applicant and appellant, who will each have a total of 10 minutes and may reserve time for rebuttals if desired. And we'll start with the applicant first, who I believe is attending via Zoom, and then followed by the appellant. For the remaining speakers, if you're in person, please file a speaker card on the form provided at the counter at the back of the chambers. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. We did receive 2 public comments prior to the deadline today. Leanne Alfaro, the applicant, submitted a public comment, and the law offices of James Philip Vaughn, on behalf of the applicant, also submitted a letter, and that's been posted on the city's website. I will go ahead and start with the applicant, who will have 10 minutes, and that'll be Leanne Alfaro. Let me just go ahead and get the speaker. Leanne, go ahead. Did you want to speak on this item?
Hi, Yeah, I was actually wondering if it's okay if I use my time after to address any allegations or questions about the appeal that's made. I feel like that would maybe be more valuable.
Through the mayor, if the applicant wishes to reserve her time for rebuttal, she is allowed to do so.
Okay, thank you.
The applicant will have 9 minutes and 44 seconds remaining. Let me just reset the time for the appellant. Carmen Briones, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Carmen Briones, and I'm 740 Bonnie Lane. And I would like to answer something to the Director of Public Works. Bonnie Lane has a mailbox, a mailman, garbage, everything, thanks to me, because I made a turnaround, a circle, a turnaround for the utilities. We don't have it. So anytime, and it was only landed, anytime I want to close, that's my land. So public utilities will not be able to go to Bonnie Lane. I just want to let you know that. My experience, I bought my property in 1998 and I was so happy because it was a land with everything that I wanted. And they told me there were not going to be a lot of development. But unfortunately, the next year, Pulte Homes started working on behind my property, a development. At that time, I didn't know about easements or encroachments or anything like that. But one thing I know, that I had a wire behind my property, in the back of my property, that when all Republican walked me through the things that I had on the property, and Pulte removed that. And I went and I said, let me talk to you, you're going on my land. They disregarded. So I went to the city and I told them what happened, and they disregarded. So Pulte advanced, and you will have in the records, advance on my land. The next time happens, the city needed a 1 foot or 3 foot of the land behind me to do some easement. So they said they were going to put a sewer for me, and so they will be taking a long way at 3 feet. And then I come today, let me take back again. I decide to have my children there. That's 5.43 acres, so I wanted to have I have 3 children. And when I work and I spend about $55,000 with Greer on the planning and everything. So when I start going to the city hall, they told me that I had to improve Bonnie Lane and 207. It was going to cost me over $400,000. And I have here the paper, okay? So there was no way that I could afford it. So my $55,000 I paid on the subdivision, it went to the grain. So I didn't do anything. Then on 2017, I was able to, somebody wanted to buy my property, and she wanted to just split it, have the house plus some land, and the rest it would be, I would keep it. So we went to the planning department, and that was Mrs. Alvarez. We went with them, and we said we want to have that. And so again, they told me that I had to spend all that money, all the improvement on Bonnie Lane. So Mrs. Alvarez said, Carmen, I can't afford to pay that, so the deal is off. I have the lawyer, it was one of the lawyers that was talking, and we were doing with Mrs. Alvarez, and she desisted because it was too much money. So now I come to this hearing and to this subdivision. I'm not here, I don't have any problem with the people subdividing, okay? I'm the one who maintains the road. I came to City Hall, I said, I want to quit claim my road. There's a lot of holes that I had to be buying, gravel and everything. So what I was told, it says, no, can't do. So they told me that I could put a gate starting my thing, and that would end anybody that come into my property. But I couldn't do that to my for the neighbors. We are like family. We get together, okay? So my cul-de-sac will be closed, and then there will be no utility, there will be no post office, and I didn't do it. I kind of regret it now, okay? Because this is the easiest subdivision that I can see. There are people that they bought 7770 Lone Tree Way, but as soon as they bought it, they start coming Bunny Lane. They had in their minds that's what it was going to be the thing. I said, no, the people that worked before, we used to be friends, they walked to us. There's no road that you come backwards. Your road is in Lone Tree Way. No, we're entitled to that. One day I was fixing, like I always do, and you will see from the neighbors, I was having to fix the cement or something on the road. The husband of the applicant came with a hammer in front of my handyman, and started smashing what he was working. So we had to call the police, and he said, I'm entitled to this road. This is an easement. I can do whatever I want. So there is a police report on that, so that's another thing that you will see. But what it hurts the most is to see the city of Brentwood, the planning department, to okay so fast for something without investigating. I understand that's not their job to do this and that, but they never done for me like that. I have a letter for each of you. I don't know how separated, but I'm not happy about it. I'm not against the people that are subdivisions or anything like that, okay? It's how they're planning. When I had to do it, I had to send letters to everyone. They told me when I complained, that we only do 300. That's fine. You see 770 Lone Tree Way. Who cares about 77 Lone Tree Way subdivision? But they didn't say we are involved in Bunny Lane. We are coming to Bunny Lane. So all the neighbors, they didn't know anything about it. So there is a thing that no rights by them, and they're upset about it because they were not notified. And the planning department, engineering, whatever, they said 300 feet, but they're coming to Bunny Lane. It's not about 7770 Lone Tree Way. The other thing, we have an easement from Bunny Lane to Lone Tree Way. All of us, we're entitled to that. But it's not being used. That's when the utilities should be turning around on public and everything. The improvements that I see, there's no improvement on Bunny Lane. In 2007, I was demanded, say you have to spend, and I have that $412,000. You could buy a home in that time with that money. However, now it's not, there's no improvement on Bunny Lane. Do the subdivision. Improve Bunny Lane as I was asked by to do it. Then that would be fine. But I think that's really unfair. I feel really, really discriminated by this. You know, all the thing, everything I do, I don't complain about filling the potholes with gravel and everything. I send everyone to my neighbors. I didn't mind opening to the utilities, doing on my land, not on the easement, to help out. But treated this way? So I just want to let you know, I'm closing. I'm not going to have any more turnaround. And I would like somebody to explain to you what really happens with Bonnie Lane. And I think, I don't know, I kind of upset and I don't want. But thank you so much for trying to investigate more. Director of Public Works, you should be able to know, wait, how do you get the mail and everything on your utilities? You are the one in Public Works. I am surprised that you don't know. That's Carmen Briones doing that on Bonnie Lane. So I hope you do know in the future. So, sir, I have a copy with the amount they charge me.
Ms. Briones, if you could give it to the city clerk, Ms. Wimberly, and she'll make sure that we get it handed to us. Thank you.
So,
and the speaker's time had expired.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll reset the clock with the 9 minutes and 44 seconds for the applicant. Leanne Alfaro, did you want to respond with your remaining time?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
So first, I just wanted to apologize that we can't be present. We had a previously planned trip to Disneyland with our kids planned before this meeting was. So I apologize that we can't be there in person. However, I did want to just introduce myself. My name is Leanne Alfaro. I have grown up locally, so has my husband, Joe Alfaro. We've attended school, we attend church locally, and I'm a small business owner in Brentwood. We have 3 little kids and we love Brentwood. We bought this piece of land back in the end of 2020. And we bought this land because we wanted to have a little piece of property that our kids could grow up on, and our goal for this property is to be able to build a home next door to my sister and her family, so that all the cousins could grow up together and run around and just have space to play. So that was just kind of our goal in buying this property. Our plan is pretty simple. We want to subdivide the property into 4 parcels. We actually wanted to subdivide it less, but we had to follow the city's zoning laws. And so we have to subdivide it more ways than we originally intended to, because our density was too low according to the city. So we are subdividing it 4 ways, and that's why there's that designated remainder. So my husband, Joe, and I plan to build a home for us and our kids, and then my sister and her husband plan to build a home for them and their kids. We want to be friends with all the neighbors. We don't want any of this like bad, I don't know, like just communication. Bonnie Lane is a private road in the sense that it's on all the property owners along Bonnie. It's on all of our property, including mine and my husband's. So it's private in the sense that the homeowners, the road falls on a little bit on everybody's property. But that being said, there is an easement that goes all the way down Bonnie Lane. And that was actually dedicated to the county, which makes it so that the public can access it. So it's a public access easement. And so the reason we want to access our parcels via Bonnie is because our designated remainder is at the front of the property near Lone Tree. And so we don't plan on building or using that part of our property. We plan on building on the property closer to Bonnie Lane. I just want to note too that on page 145 of the staff report under response 6, it also clarifies that that easement going down Bonnie is a public access easement. So we also feel like it's not realistic for us to access our property via Lone Tree due to the Lone Tree widening project currently happening. We feel like it's much safer for us to access via Bonnie. And like I said, it's just 2 homes being built, not an entire subdivision. And then also I did just want to address that Bonnie could use some work, and we are more than willing to contribute our fair share to that work. We would love to enter into some kind of agreement with the neighbors where we all come together and figure out how to improve the road. I think it would benefit all of the properties that are along Bonnie. And we're happy to contribute to that. We want to help make Bonnie better, and we truly do believe by developing our property, it is going to improve the frontage of Bonnie. Because yeah, right now it's pretty rough, and yeah, we would love to make it better. So that's all I have to say for now, but I'm happy to answer any questions now or later.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions of the applicant during this time? We will have an opportunity to question both the applicant and Mrs. Briones during our discussion. Okay, we see no questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Alfaro. Okay, if there are no further speakers, I need a motion to close
Mayor,
the public
I do have
hearing.
additional speaker cards.
Oh, yes. Okay, thank you.
I'll call on Marion Allison, followed by Walt Gardenier. You have 3 minutes. You need to speak at the mic, so it's picked up for the people attending at home.
Okay. So I made this nifty little display for you guys. All right, so you can see.
Ma'am, I apologize. For our listeners who are at home, we'll need you to speak into that mic so that it can be picked
So
up.
how can I show you guys this as an interactive type thing?
Yeah. You can move it behind you and we'll be able to see that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a map of Trinity Estates down here. This is the parcel in question, 770 Lone Tree Way. It's pink. It's going to be pink all the way through. Bonnie Lane, 740 Bonnie Lane. Carmen's property is blue all the way through. So it's all color coded. Okay. Basically what we have going on here is this is the easement, the dotted line that everyone's talking about that goes all the way down to the end, which is supposed to connect to Kenwood. And the Alfaros at 770 have a small easement here, as do 761 or 681. There is no easement the rest of the way down on the south-facing properties. There's no easement. There's one easement on the north-facing side that goes all the way out to O'Hara, but there's no easement here. So the easement that she's talking about that she says she has access to, we're trying to figure out where that is because her easement stops here and then she has to cross over Carmen's property to get out. So when Carmen bought her property, she was told she had one landlocked neighbor that she needed to service, and I've identified that property for you here. Okay, so that's the schematic. Trying to make it Easy to see Carmen's property, parcel D, parcel 770 Lone Tree Way, etc. Okay, here's her easement. It's supposed to go back to Brentwood Park and then maybe eventually wrap out to Kenwood. 770 Lone Tree Way has a partial easement that runs adjacent to that, along that parallel. And then they also have an easement that Carmen's talking about. She's like, that's supposed to be your public utility easement. That's supposed to take your garbage trucks and your fire trucks and your police cars and everything down and exit out Lone Tree Way. If Carmen didn't put a circle back here, there is no way for people to get in and out and turn around with their garbage trucks and their big vehicles. She's providing that access out of the goodness of her heart. Here's the map, the subdivision map, January 1976. We have a mysterious parcel 5 that appears. Maybe that's what the entitlement is speaking about. We went down to the city of Brentwood to ask them to identify parcel 5 and tell us where it was, and they have yet to do so. Okay, so you can see in 1976 how they laid out and subdivided that land into 4.
The speaker's timer had expired. The next speaker is Walt Gardenier, followed by A. Strozas.
Give me a moment to put my glasses on, please.
You have all the time you need. I understand exactly how that works.
Good evening. My name is Walt Gardenier. I reside at 900 Bonnie Lane. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak. I want to start off by saying how surprised and disappointed my wife Nancy and I are in the actions of the Planning Commission to vote on a project that will affect all the residents on Bonnie Lane without proper investigation. The developer said, and I quote, "Well, there have been no specific discussion with the neighboring property owners regarding the roads. She and her husband have met with them and they are excited about the potential development." This is a bold-faced lie. They never met with any of us. That's why the appeal got filed. Per City Brentwood discussion item 2882 on 1/17/23, there is a note about this proposal stating the date of notice was put in the Brentwood Press and also mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the site on January 6, 2023. I do not see how this is fair act notice when most of the residents on Bonnie Lane are over 300 feet from the site and all access per proposal is from Bonnie and will affect every owner on Bonnie Lane since it's a private road. In addition, supposed signs posted as required cannot be seen by the residents on Bonnie's. Most residents do not go down to proposed development area. Bonnie Lane is not a gravel road. It is a paved asphalt road. The residents take care of themselves. Since it is a private road, it is not maintained by the city and was noted in the minutes. What's going to happen to the road when 60 to 80,000 pound trucks, construction trucks, start pounding on it, not to mention all the added additional traffic afterwards? Since the original address of the current owners says 7770 Lone Tree Way, why can't the entrance be from Lone Tree Way? The plans show a road planned from Lone Tree Way, but just for maintenance vehicles. This does not make any sense. Why can't the main entrance be on Lone Tree Way? Lastly, I realize developments are going to happen. We're not opposing the development. We are opposing the access of Bonnie Lane when the address is on Lone Tree Way and nobody has told us that they're going to step up and help take care of Bonnie Lane when we've been doing this all on our own. My wife and I have been in the house over 35 years. And I put more pavement down to patch holes and everything. And every time a garbage truck rolls over it, they beat it up. Every time a fire truck comes down there, which we know doesn't happen very often, thank goodness, they beat it up. So in conclusion, it just doesn't make any sense to have the main access to this development via Bonnie Lane. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is A. Struzis, followed by Danny Dorman.
Hi, my name is Andriana Strizis, and I live on 811 Bonnie Lane. I'm the landlocked lot. And this is the a letter that we all wrote. Dear City of Brentwood, we are writing to you as we recently received notification from Carmen Briones, who resides on the property that has ownership of the turnaround where utilities such as garbage trucks and mail can turn around. Until now, this has been a vital point of access to our utilities and to the city. As property owners on Bonnie Lane, we were granted the right to use the easement that connects Bonnie Lane and Lone Tree Way, but it was never opened. We believe that it is important for us to have access to it now. Closing the turnaround area on Carmen Briones' property would prevent utility vehicles from turning around on Bonnie Lane. This could have serious consequences for our safety and well-being, as emergency vehicles and garbage trucks would have no alternative routes and would have to either reverse out or drive off-road to turn around. We believe that opening the easement is necessary to prevent these potential hazards and to provide a safe and efficient means of access to Lone Tree Way for all of us and all utility services. We understand that there may have been some issues in the past that prevented the opening of the easement. However, we believe that those issues have been resolved, and there is no reason why we should continue to be denied access to our rightful property. We urge you to consider our request and to take whatever steps are necessary to open the easement. We believe that this is not only the right thing to do, but also a responsible thing to do for the well-being of our community. Thank you for your time and consideration. And this was signed by the residents of 940, 900, 811, 861, and 871 Bonnie Lane. And I also wanted to speak of an incident that occurred on February 20th, I believe it was a Monday. I have horses, and my neighbor who's trying to develop the property lit 2 fires right next to my horses that Monday while the farrier was there. I had left with my kids to go get lunch, and I came back and my kids were screaming fire, and the neighbor was waving to me with a gas can in his hand. And the farrier was really upset too, because my horse was freaking out. My horse could have killed him. And essentially could have killed my kids if my kids were out there. And he lit a fire. There was smoke all through my property. And I believe it was an aggressive gesture towards us because of this. He's never lit a fire before. He has 5 acres of property. I don't understand why it was right next to my horses while the farrier was there that day. And also that day, he was driving up and down Bonnie Lane in some little golf cart thing he has for no reason. So that's all I have to say.
The speaker's time has expired. The next speaker is Danny Dorman, followed by Victor Segura.
Well, good evening again. First and foremost, I have no dog in this fight. And as I was listening to both sides, I only can recommend whatever it is that will allow people to really drill down and figure this whole thing out. However that is, you folks have to vote. I would highly recommend it, because in listening to both sides, I hear both sides. I understand both sides. And honestly, the neighbors could probably answer this far better than I, but it sounds like this whole thing boils down to a public street of some sort. Now, whether that public street is Bonnie Lane or whatever it is that was spoken about going on to Lone Tree, that sounds like where everything begins and ends. And again, I may be wrong. I really don't know. But like I said, I have no dog in this fight. This sounds like there is no easy answer other than whatever is needed to, relook at this for all parties concerned. I think everyone really wants to do the right thing. This certainly isn't some big monster Shazino type of thing. It doesn't seem like it. It just seems like a property owner wants to do something. Another property owner wants to keep something. And that's what makes Brentwood, Brentwood. And lastly, somebody left their phone. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Victor Segura.
Hello, Council. My name is Victor Segura. There's not much more left for me to say. I think the neighbors have already covered all. I'm representing the neighbors of Bonnie Lane. But just to reiterate, the biggest concern for us here is that Ms. Briones has been loaning us out part of her property for that turnaround. So it's going to be, vital to really find out where this easement is, open it, have public utilities be able to access it. Because, any given day she can close it, she can sell her home. And the new owner, we're not sure what they're going to do. If she decides to sell, or if she, any reason really. And I'm a little bit surprised too, because when I moved to Bonnie Lane about 5 years ago, I tried to subdivide the property in, I want to say 3 or 4 lots. Permits alone were about $400,000. In addition, I had to improve Bonnie Lane and O'Hara Lane. And I was just really surprised at those prices. So if there's not going to be any improvements on Bonnie, given this subdivision, then, it comes to a shock to all of us. Again, I don't think any of us are against subdividing. People have land, they got to put it to good use. But it is kind of a shock. It's a surprise that there's not going to be any upgrades to our lane, given there's going to be more usage. Right now we're using Ms. Briones' land as almost borrowed, for free. And so if there's going to be a change, we might as well be equal across the board. Make people upgrade the sidewalks, the streets, whatever it might be. Like I said, I don't have much to add. That's just my opinion at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no additional speaker cards, and I don't see any hands raised in Zoom.
Okay. If there are no speakers, do I have a motion to close the public hearing at this time?
So moved.
We have a first.
Second.
Second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, council discussion.
I have another question. So because the address is Lone Tree, so he's saying because he lives on Bonnie, if he were to subdivide, he would have to pay for the improvements because his physical address is Bonnie. But because the applicant's physical address, even though she accesses through Bonnie, is Lone Tree, she doesn't have the same financial responsibility?
That would be a question for staff.
And I'm happy to defer to Mr. Tsubota, but I will also take a crack at this. So your address is not an indication of the legal rights or obligations associated with your ownership of the property necessarily. An address is given as a physical location that identifies the property for, among other purposes, U.S. mail service, emergency services, so on and so forth. It doesn't in and of itself confer either benefits or obligations of this nature. We look to things like the abutters' rights, the easements, those other tangible property rights that are associated. So in speaking with Mr. Tsubota's shop, they have reviewed the easements associated with the applicant's project and have determined that they do in fact provide access to this parcel. Now, the applicant did indicate that she would be willing to discuss entering into an agreement to share in costs associated with the maintenance and repair of Bonnie Lane, but that was something that she had offered and isn't necessarily required as a result of her address one way or another. Does that help?
So why would we require him to pay for it, but we didn't require her to pay for it?
I can't speak to any other applications. We don't have that information in front of us and it's not on the agenda. So that's not information we have tonight.
I actually, and I'm not getting there yet, but I think there's so many questions that I don't even think we should decide on this tonight. I want to go to the county and understand all of the easements. I want to understand the legal requirements for who's responsible for what road. on the GIS map, when it's a road, you see the top and the bottom of the road. That doesn't exist here. It's just a line. So it's property butts up to property. So I just think there's so many, I mean, I think we need to answer all of the questions that they had before I would make a decision. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions right now. And it doesn't even sound like the residents have all talked about it. And can we as a city require someone, if you're going to subdivide, that your entrance is on Lone Tree, if that's your address? Or can they say, no, we're going to come in through the other side? Is there, what can we do as a city?
I can probably step in here. There is a condition of approval, if I can find it. So it is on page 158 of the packet. It is condition of approval 9A. This relates to improvements in public utilities to serve this project. Understanding that ideally, that this project would construct utilities and have access onto Kenwood. But it does mention that, and I did mention that there's a strip of land that is not owned by the applicant. There's no easement, is I believe owned by the irrigation district. So the condition is written that in the event the permittee is unable to secure the necessary easements and approvals, permittee shall design the project with public utility connections and all weather access to Lone Tree to the satisfaction of the city engineer.
Why don't we put that as a requirement for the approval? Like, I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. Shouldn't she have to go and get all of that first before she comes and applies?
We've drafted the condition in the event that she's unable to acquire all the easements.
Is it uncommon for someone to ask for that to be done first before it's approved?
It really depends. It's project by project. For this particular project, for utility purposes, it makes sense to connect to Kenwood. They don't have all the easements to do so. So in the event that they can't do that, we would be okay if they connected utilities and have access off of Lone Tree.
But here's the thing: I guess I'm a little bit confused because we're hearing different stories. If Miss Carmen Briones wants to put up a gate, can she put up a gate today?
That's a good legal question. I'm not available to answer that.
Yeah, and we got that notice at some point this afternoon and haven't had a chance to evaluate that at all. That's completely new information that was provided this afternoon.
Okay, I'll let them answer.
I think that's a good key right there as far as maybe us not having all the information ready, because I would agree with that. I'm confused about something. In reading the agenda packet, I was under the impression maybe there was some expectation of improvements to Bonnie Lane by Ms. Briones based on the amount of subdivisions that she was planning versus what Alfaro is planning. Because there was 10 versus 4 subdivisions, if I recall. But then to hear this gentleman saying that he was looking at doing 4 and was also required, I'm extremely confused about what the requirements are. On page 220 of the staff report, it said per CA DRE regulations, 5 lots are a subdivision, but neither Alfaro nor this gentleman here have 5 lots. So I would like some understanding about the 10 subdivisions versus the 5 versus the 4. What is required when it comes to needing to improve Bonnie Lane? But again, with the expectation, I'm not sure we have everything we need tonight to make a decision. Thank you.
So for that part of the staff report was a question that was asked of staff if they wanted to subdivide the property. So we received no formal application, nor did we receive a preliminary concept regarding any type of project. If anybody were to submit an application for that, we would go through the same process as we did for Ms. Alfaro, letting them know what the general plan density requirements are, and that's where you went and read the 10 units. That would be the mid-range. So the same process would be done for anybody that would want to subdivide, and we would see what would be feasible for their property, including what kind of improvements would be required.
So were the Alfaros presented with the idea that they could be facing those kinds of fees for the Bonnie Lane improvements?
That's part of their conditions of approval based on their specific project.
Because it almost sounded more voluntary when they were commenting on that.
The voluntary for
Alfaros to contribute to that, to the improvements.
So the voluntary part was contributing to Bonnie Lane because it is a fee in ownership. But the requirements for the Alfaros is based on what it is on their property, for specifically Trinity Estates.
And what about in the letters that we're receiving this evening, and thank you for all of the preparation all of you have done, I appreciate that. The letter that was asking about opening up the easements, why hasn't that been done? Can that, and what would be involved with that?
I would have to defer to our Public Works Director.
Absolutely. So we do have another condition of approval. It's on page 161. And if you look on the tentative map, I'm trying to find a page. I believe it's packet page 216. So packet page 216 does show a proposed Honey Lane that will ultimately at some point connect Bonnie Lane to Lone Tree. And to the extent that this project is only a 4-lot with a designated remainder, they are going to improve Honey Lane along their project. Now, if that designated remainder ultimately subdivides and improves, we would require that project to extend Honey Lane all the way to Lone Tree.
Who would be improving Honey Lane?
Any proposed development of the designated remainder.
But why would you say Honey Lane has to be done, but why don't the Alfaros have to do theirs all the way from Lone Tree up?
I'm not familiar with the history of the neighboring applications.
It feels like they're parallel roads. You would think that if you're approving one, you would have to approve the other because they're parallel. Like why is there different stuff?
Are they both private or public? Or, I mean, I know Bonnie's private, but.
From your point of view, like why? Because it just feels like there's like different, like there's a lot of if-thens, and I just wish it was just Honey Lane is happening, and these are the reasons it's happening, and their road on the Alfaros is parallel, and that should happen too because it is this, or that doesn't happen because it is that.
Well, typically, to the extent that there's a subdivision and they're proposing units, buildings, we would require improvements for access, road improvements, utility improvements, that and such. To the extent that it's offsite or a designated remainder, I don't think there's a nexus for us to require them to do roadway improvements.
So we can't require for those 4 lots to have the same thing as Honey Lane?
The four lots are doing improvements.
I have a question. I'm going to butt in here. Couple of little things that I can. The thing that makes it really difficult when you sit in this seat is what is on the agenda for the night, right? And so tonight we're supposed to consider the appeal based on whether the applicant meets the city standards. But I have to agree with where I can hear the questions from my colleagues. I'm not sure based on the presentations tonight that I understand what the city standards are because they seem to have differed. And one of the things that I think brought me quite a bit of apprehension was the fact that we have several people who've signed affidavits and who've shown up. And I want to be very careful about when I sit in this seat that I'm not accusing any member who works for the city of doing anything not disfavorable to any of our residents or that they haven't done anything, but it is bothersome that I've seen the large sign because it's right by my house on Lone Tree. And I'm wondering the placement. I'm not quite certain where the placement of the sign was on Bonnie Lane. And when the mailing, there's a lot of people saying they didn't receive the notice and had the opportunity to speak and be heard about the applicant. So that's quite concerning. Additionally, I feel like I need more information on the historical narrative about many of the residents who are here tonight who said they had different standards about how they had to improve the road. I know the road is not what we're considering. We're considering the application, but the road is so imperative. I think also I don't have enough information on the opening of the easement between Bonnie Lane and Lone Tree Way. And so I would have to actually agree that I don't feel like I have enough information supplied as well as a substantial amount of information supplied tonight that I would like the opportunity to read to. And while I hate to kick the can, I would actually want to potentially see if we can kick the can on this just to have more opportunity to give. Ms. Briones didn't have, when you sit on the bench, you say, give someone their day in court. Ms. Briones acknowledged that she didn't have her day before this council. to the city to really explain and talk. And I would like to give all the residents more opportunity so that we can thoroughly make an informed decision rather than rush and make a decision tonight.
Before we move away from questioning, I do have a couple of questions. Miki, is it possible for you to bring up the map on page 164 so that we can all see it? I'd like some clarification as far as the easements. What exactly are the challenges to the easements? Which the applicant, which easements do they have access to, which do they not? And what's the process to bridge that gap, if there is a process to do that?
Absolutely.
Can we share my screen?
Is there any way we can flip it so that it's like Lone Tree? When I was looking at the packet, I kept flipping the paper, so Lone Tree was at the bottom. I'm sorry.
I appreciate the comment. I'm used to always making sure that north points up. So thank you for that. So let me see if I can clarify this. It is our understanding, based on the title documents we have, based on the recorded documents and maps that we have, that Bonnie Lane, from the very top of this map, from basically almost all the way to Kenwood, all the way to the left, all the way to, what is that, O'Hara, that is a private road insofar that the property owners own the land underneath the road, the asphalt itself. That there is a public easement for use of that existing road. On the right side of this map, going down from Bonnie Lane down to Lone Tree, this is a proposed Honey Lane. It's our understanding that that is also a public access easement and a utility easement. And one of the things we work with the applicant throughout this project is to make sure that that road at some point long in the future, when this development, this whole neighborhood develops with high rises or whatnot, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we have to look at, I guess, worst case for development. You know, we have to anticipate that this road may be needed and may need to be improved at some point. But at this point, because it's just a 4-lot subdivision, we've conditioned them to improve Honey Lane up until that middle house, and at the designated remainder, which is not part of this project, there's no proposed building or development on the designated remainder. At some point,
it's 5 lots, right? If I count one, isn't it 5 that they're subdividing?
Technically, it's 5 lots, but under the Subdivision Map Act, they call it 4 lots and a designated remainder. There's no entitlements associated with the designated remainder. This project doesn't approve houses or building on the designated. It's leftover, basically. So at some point, if that designated remainder decides to subdivide or build, we would require them to improve Honey Lane all the way to Lone Tree.
So can we require them to do that, to fix that road today, legally?
Honey Lane?
Yes, as a condition of approval.
If you look at, this is probably not, the next sheet shows that they are going to put, I believe, 12 feet of asphalt.
No, can we demand that they build the road to Brentwood standards, Honey Lane? Can I legally say today that I would approve if they built out this road? And that is a condition of approval, no ands, ifs, or buts.
Council can certainly suggest that or direct that. I will probably defer to our attorney on the legalities of that.
Yeah, so at this point, we would want to look and make sure that we currently had the nexus to require that of the applicant. And that's not an answer we can give you tonight on the dais. If you want us to look into that, we're happy to do it. But that's not something we can analyze for you right here.
If Ms. Carmen Briones were to shut Bonnie Lane and they want to subdivide and build these houses, they need emergency access, correct?
They being the applicant here tonight? So there are separate questions as to the ability to shut down access to a public easement, right? Those, we're not addressing those questions right now because that's not part of this application. Certainly this project does need emergency access, yes.
Well, I know we're in discussion, and I've heard from 3 of the council members what your concerns are. It's been made clear from both the applicant and the residents that are here tonight that none of them are against the project. They're all looking for a solution that would work for everyone. I feel like in order to get to that solution, there's more information that I would also like to have. And I would also like to give our staff an opportunity to look into the concerns that have been brought up that they haven't had opportunity to regarding the questions on access to public easements versus private properties. I know that I am looking through this project through a lens of personal bias. I am a strong believer in individual property rights. And so I would be really hesitant having the questions that I have right now and having having our staff not having the opportunity to clarify some of the questions that we have for me to make a decision on this tonight, personally. Councilman Ordinance.
So going through the packet, I had put together quite a few questions regarding this particular project. However, the majority of the questions were answered when the whole neighborhood showed up. My main question was, how does the neighborhood feel about this development, or the street feel about this neighborhood or this development being put in? I think that question was answered pretty clearly tonight. And I also, being a strong believer in private property, think that we need to research all of the options. And I am concerned that it seems like at least 3 other people have asked to develop their land and have been told they had to improve Bonnie Lane, but this one isn't. It's kind of concerning. I would like to know why that is and do some research on that. So I don't think there's any way I could make a decision tonight without getting a lot more information.
So I have a question of our legal counsel to stay within the boundaries of what is agendized tonight. What is the best way for us to move forward with sending this back to staff for these clarifications that have been requested?
So if I'm understanding the majority of council, you are looking for a continuance of this item so that staff can do some research into the existing easements and rights of this property and its owner, which staff can certainly do. What staff is not really in a position to do is research the applications or indications of interest from every other neighbor and bring that back as bearing on decisions on this project, simply because this project has to stand on its own merits, right? So if you can provide us direction with what information you need us to come back with, we can do that for this project, but it does need to look at the project in question.
I'd like to give some clarification as to what I would need as a council person and what I think I've heard tonight. One of them was for staff to research the consequences of the gate that's going to be put up based on the document from Ms. Briones' attorney, James Phillips Vons. I think there was a question asked about that and access to the road. Another question I would have is about the opening of the easement between Bonnie Lane and Lone Tree Way, as well as the requirements. I believe, Councilmember Mendoza, you asked the question about Honey Lane. And so the extension of Honey Lane to Lone Tree, the requirements of having the applicant add that as a condition for approval of their application. If there's anything else that I'm missing.
Think
I
any
have a
other
question.
questions?
When it comes, sorry.
No, go ahead.
When it comes to this orphans lot, I think it's very interesting that there's an orphan lot, right? As soon as the subdivision is done, what are the guidelines to sell it and then have someone apply to build on it?
So I'll defer to Miki, but Mr. Tsubota, but this isn't an orphan lot. It's a designated remainder, which is a fully legal mechanism under the Subdivision Map Act. It's not an attempt to evade the law. It is a type of development that is recognized by the law, and we particularly recognize it in our own ordinance as well. So it isn't a questionable tool. It's something that's available to anyone using the Subdivision Map Act. And I'll let Miki.
Ditto.
I think I have one more addition. There was a question by a member during public comment about what parcel 5 was. They said they didn't get any response. And so I'd like to know if staff can give us what parcel 5 is.
So I wasn't sure if that comment was actually meant with regard to the city of Brentwood or the county, because it's not really the city of Brentwood's purview to maintain those types of real property records. Those are maintained by the county. So you might ask for clarification there, but I wasn't sure that was something that they understood to be within our power.
Thank you. I was wondering the same. So something we can look up. Thank you.
Maybe if staff can work with Ms. Briones and they can identify what area that is by elimination. I mean that would be great if we need to identify another lot.
I think what I'm hearing from council, though, that's a county specific thing that they would go to the recorder's office to find out.
But staff can help with that. They've helped people with other things. There's no reason why we can't direct staff to help them identify a lot.
Thank you so much. I know that I understand there's a lot of concern and frustration, but we have to stick to the agenda so that the rest of the community
So if
can
they
participate in this.
can I ask to identify this lot 5?
You can certainly ask our city attorney if we're allowed to do so.
I can ask that I think I can ask of staff. So then I'll figure that out.
So what would be helpful tonight is if the council is going to continue this item, if we have direction as to what you all want to see, so we know what to bring back in the package to all of you. We can evaluate what is provided to us. The city is not the keeper of, official land use records. That is the county. We will review what is provided by the applicant and appellant, but we are not the holder of those official documents. That's not our role. So we can certainly evaluate what's been provided, definitely.
I mean, I don't want to argue about it, but if we're making a big decision like this, we need to have all of the information in our hands to make the best educated decision. So we might not be the holders of it, but we live in the land, on the land that's being archived by the county. So I'm not understanding this, but we can take that offline.
Instead of taking it offline, just so everybody's okay, I think I presented 4 items. I'd like to add in addition to it to satisfy everyone. If the county can, if the city can reach out to the county recorder's office to find out what parcel 5 is, then I think it would add to. Thank you.
And can we ask council to repeat the items just to make sure we've covered everything, please? Council, not council.
Right, CIL or SEL.
So I actually have 4 items, so perhaps I'm missing something. Number 1 is research the consequences of gating off Bonnie Lane and denying the public access. Number 2 would be opening the easement between Lone Tree Way and Bonnie Lane. Number 3 would be the current development of Honey Lane to city specifications in conjunction with this map approval. And number 4 would be the city's outreach to the county to identify parcel number 5.
You're not missing any, was 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
When this comes back again to us, does it have to be renoticed to all of the neighbors?
It does, unless we continue to a date certain tonight, but I don't believe that we're in a position to continue to a date certain given the amount of information the council has requested. So yes, staff will be required to notice in conformance with the state and local law requirements.
Okay, so I would like to go above and beyond the state local law requirements because the law requires the lone tree, 300 feet from that lone tree address, and this is north. Can we add noticing everyone on Bonnie Lane as well?
So I believe that we actually noticed 300 feet from the perimeter of the entire site. So it's not just 300 feet from that spot on Lone Tree. It's 300 feet from the perimeter of the site.
Can we, and this is also a sticking point because I think this has come up before. We as a council wanted to enlarge the area of notice, but can we please include everyone on Bonnie Lane? Because I think this is a kind of a quasi-private road and it impacts them more than a regular road. So if we could notice them all, it's not that many houses.
My only concern there is that the law requires the city to follow the statute and the local law because that applies to every project. And so this would now suddenly be treating this project differently than other projects. If any other member of the public, including anyone from Bonnie Lane, wanted to request that notice be provided, we can certainly take that request tonight and be sure to include them in the mailing notification. We'll do that for any resident of town. But making an ad hoc adjustment to our notice distances kind of runs afoul of the due process and uniformity that we afford to all applicants.
Okay, so they can either tell us, and if you have anyone else that wants to receive a notice, either email the city clerk or email me. I'm online on City Council, and I'll make sure that they get it. Anyone else who wants to be noticed.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Okay, so do we have a motion regarding this item?
So motion to continue to an unknown date to research the 4 items listed by our council.
Okay, we have a first.
Second.
Staff, do you have clear understanding of the request?
I believe I do. Ms. Morris, Mr. Tsubota, do we need anything else?
Not at this time.
Thank you. So we have a first and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. Okay, we will move now into item D1. A resolution regarding amendments to the 2022-23 cost allocation plan and schedule of city fees. Staff.
Thank you. Tim Nielsen will be making the presentation tonight, so if we can give him a moment to set it up.
All right, Honorable Mayor and council members, good evening and thank you very much. This item on the agenda before you this evening is an update to our cost allocation plan. The city's normal practice is to do a major update to the cost allocation plan once per year. That's brought forth by the finance department. And then if there are additional modifications that are requested, those are brought forward by the individual departments requesting those considerations. So that is what you have before you this evening. This is particular to the building permit fees that are contained within that cost allocation plan. To take a step back and kind of look at the cost allocation plan and its intent as a whole, the cost allocation plan provides a method for the city to recover the direct and indirect costs of providing city services in conjunction with permitting. The cost allocation plan also provides a framework for computing fees and charges that are levied for services rendered. It also provides that framework so that staff can consistently apply those fees across the board between various applicants at various times. The cost allocation plan also allows us to be consistent with the cost recovery methods that are provided within state law. The recommendation before the council this evening
is to consider the changes being recommended and adopt a resolution establishing some new fees, modifying existing fees, and then also eliminating some permitting fees. And I'll get into those details here shortly. If the council were to adopt the modifications currently as proposed, these are intended to recover the costs of services that are provided through that permitting activity. It would also allow for streamlining of our existing fee structure in order to simplify that fee structure, simplify how those fees are charged, and then also remove unused fee line items. Overall, this would also reflect the gradual shift in our permitting activity from largely new single-family development more toward infill, multifamily development, and then also non-development activity, maintenance of existing buildings and infrastructure. This should also be noted that this is a very important interim step before the council may consider a comprehensive permitting fee study, and that would take place through the strategic initiative process. So, like I said, this is kind of an important pre-step or first step before such consideration may be made. I want to talk a little bit about the methodology here because it's really important to understand that the fees that the city collects for permitting activity needs to be tied to those services rendered. We shouldn't be collecting exorbitantly more or less than the cost to provide those services to the public. And so in providing the recommendations before the council tonight, that was the primary concern, and a lot of work was put into understanding exactly what the city's costs are, how much time is spent by different individuals involved in the process at various steps in the process. So the recommendations before you tonight take that into consideration first and foremost in recovering that cost. And those costs are largely broken down into three main categories. Those are administrative processing costs in handling the permits, review of those documents to ensure that those documents are in conformance with the requirements of the building code and other ordinances, and then also the amount of inspection time that's required to ensure that the actual improvements made at the project site are in conformance with the plans and other codes. A second step in the process was working with an outside consultant, NBS Government Finance Group, in order to verify that the methods that we used are in common practice and in keeping with best practices in determining those fees. And then lastly, we also compared our results with 5 other shall we say, more responsive comparison cities where we were able to get information from them in order to be able to make those comparisons to make sure that we're not out of line there either, that we're kind of in step with that going rate, if you will. So to get into the actual modifications being proposed, in the packet you have a red line, strike through, underlined version of the applicable pages in the cost allocation plan. And to sum that up, it breaks down into a few different areas. First off are the valuation tables. The valuation tables are very important when it comes to determining the valuation for new development. So if it's new square footage, new buildings, new homes, new multifamily structures being constructed, those tables aid in determining the average values of those construction projects. And then that also enables us to provide a foundation or a nexus to determine the building permit and plan check fees for that new construction. Those valuations, they do include all aspects of the construction from the laying of the foundation all the way through the finished materials. So it is intended to capture, like I said, it is an average and it's a nationwide average, but it does provide that basis for ultimate fee calculation for new construction. These valuations are published on a semi-annual basis by the International Code Council. And so the proposal, if the council were to entertain this tonight and approve the proposal, we would be updating those valuation tables per the ICC recommendations on an annual basis in order to keep track with that kind of the industry direction and best practices. There are 2 new fees that are being proposed for your consideration this evening. First off, there is a building permit issuance fee, and that's intended to recover the administrative costs for non-development related building permit applications. That fee would mirror an existing permit issuance fee that we have in place for electrical, plumbing, and mechanical permits, and would apply to building permits as well, selective building permits as well. The second proposal for you tonight is an energy storage system fee that would help us recover our inspection costs for energy storage systems, also known as like home battery backups, which are becoming more and more prevalent. There's also some fees that we are proposing for removal from the cost allocation plan, either because they are services that are not rendered, services that are not used by the public, by our customers, or because there are other methods that we have in order to be able to recover the costs associated with those activities. And then most of the focus would be on modifications to existing fees. There are 7 in particular, including plan check fees for new single-family residential, in order to be able to collect the fees at the time that the services are actually rendered for that plan check. Also to eliminate miscellaneous plan review fees, and to avoid multiple charges of miscellaneous permit issuance fees, in order to, again, index the fees to the time that the service is actually rendered and to recover the costs associated with that. Also to base the swimming pool permits on valuations instead of a fixed fee. I also want to point out that I think it's on page 216 of the cost allocation plan. That's also on page, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I do though want to point out that there is also a change proposed to a swimming pool encroachment permit deposit. Currently it's set at $500. It's proposed to increase to $1,500. That is a fee that allows the city to require the contractor to repair any damage done to city infrastructure in the event that there's a heavy piece of equipment crossing city sidewalk, that the contractor would then be required to repair that damage before they finish out with their permit. And that kind of keeps them accountable to be able to do so. The existing amount is easier to walk away from a contractor's perspective in the event that there is damage done. Also to update the setup fees for mobile homes to reflect the actual average cost of providing those services, updating and streamlining window replacement and door replacement costs, and then also ensuring that the solar permit fees adhere to the legally allowable limits under California state law. As I mentioned, one of the checkpoints that we wanted to make sure we touched on was to compare our fees, the fees that we are proposing for amendment to 5 other cities in our general area. And pretty much without exception, I should say with one exception, our fees, our proposed fees fall within that range as outlined in the staff report. And there's a table in there with the range of fees as charged by those 5 other cities. I think the one exception there is the swimming pool permitting fees. And that, again, is based on cost recovery. The proposed fee would be based on our cost recovery efforts, and that the city does have some additional inspections that other cities don't necessarily carry out necessarily in the same way to ensure that our infrastructure is maintained, and if there is any damage, to make sure that that is repaired. So we do have some additional burden associated with that, and the cost recovery associated with that. Before I conclude, if the City Council would like to entertain a motion adopting these changes, I would request that on page 216 of the cost allocation plan, which is page 127 of the packet, that there be some additional language included in the motion, including the column heading there with language to state unless noted otherwise, so that we can clarify that the pool and spa valuations are per pool and spa, that there's no confusion there with the square footage heading at each of those column headings. I do want to finish up talking about the fiscal impact. We're looking at potentially an increase of $400,000 to $450,000 per year of additional revenue. And this is based on our baseline permits. Now, when I say baseline permits, Those are on this list here, pretty much everything except for the single family homes. Our baseline permits are what I'm considering are kind of maintenance or bread and butter permits, the vast majority of our permits, and that those don't involve new development. New development is a little bit more difficult to forecast, especially in today's environment. And overall, the fiscal impact, this would smooth out the impact of future swings in development-related activity as well, allowing for that continued cost recovery for those day in and day out permits that the city processes. And again, this is an important step given the evolution of the permitting needs of our customers and of the residents of Brentwood. I think that's everything I wanted to cover in my presentation. This effort tonight does reflect a lot of time spent by various staff members, including Mr. Breen and Mrs. Morris, our building official. Ken Murphy is also here this evening to kind of lend his support in answering questions if necessary. And then we also have Nicole Kassam. She's available representing NBS, which is that outside firm that kind of did the evaluation of the fee changes as proposed. And there's also a letter attached to the staff report from NBS kind of summing up those changes as well. So that concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back over to Mayor Bryant.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any clarifying questions of staff at this time?
I have a question. I just wanted to clarify for some certain fees, for example, the encroachment permit that's $500 that will increase to $1,500. Can we explain for those who are listening what happens if a person doesn't meet or exceeds the $500 amount? Currently, who's eating that cost?
So the repairs would need to be done at the city's cost, and that $500 bond is posted and can be cashed, if you will, in order to be able to pay an offset for the cost of repairing that infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons it's easy to walk away from it from a contractor's perspective. It doesn't happen often. I will say that. For the most part, the contractors are good about fixing the right-of-way when it is damaged. But that is a refundable amount, so that if the right-of-way is found, inspected, and found to be in good standing, then that full amount is refunded to the contractor at the end of the permitting process.
So by assuring we're increasing it, it just gives us more access to have the resources. Should they exceed if it was $500 now and they exceed it, we have access versus us eating the cost.
Correct, correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any further clarifying questions of staff?
I have one. The ESS fees, what do the inspections entail and who does them?
The ESS, or the home battery backup, usually consists of a single inspection in order to final the installation and to verify that everything is code compliant. And those inspections are completed by our building inspection staff.
Because I would have thought it would be done by the installers. Why would it not be done by the installers?
The installers are the ones who schedule the inspections, or the homeowner schedules the inspections. But like all permits issued by the city, all building permits issued by the city, it is the city's building inspection staff that verifies completeness and accuracy of the work.
Okay. And then the increase in cost of going solar based on the fees for solar permits and requirements of SB 379. Is any of this tied to that?
As far as the solar permit increase goes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so there are certain limits. I think it's a $450 limit for any residential solar system up to 15 kilowatts that is placed on all cities, all jurisdictions as a result of that state law. I think it's Government Code 66015 actually that limits that amount that the city can charge. So we want to make sure that we don't go over that $450 amount. And over the years, as our permitting fees have been increasing by CPI, we're getting close to that mark on some permits. And so we want to make sure that we have a hard and fast limit and don't exceed that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, if there are no further clarifying questions of staff, I need a motion I will now open the public hearing and turn it to you, Margaret.
If you're in person, please file a speaker card with the form provided on the counter at the back of the chambers. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And no public comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. I don't have any speaker cards. I do have one hand raised. I'll call on Carolina Villaseca. Carolina, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I was listening to the presentation very, very closely, but then my son needed help with science, so I had to step away, and I missed the part about the roofs. Could you please go through that again? Because increasing to repair roofs, like I said, I missed that part, so I'm not clear on why we are increasing the fees to repair roofs. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised and no speaker cards.
Okay. Before we respond to the question, if there are no further public comments, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
A motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah, first.
Second.
A second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Now we'll move into council discussion, but before we do that, Tim, could you respond to the question of the caller?
Yes. So looking at our current practice with respect to our roofing permits, re-roofing permits, the cost allocation plan currently allows for the city to basically charge 1 hour of inspection time in conjunction with the issuance of those building permit fees for the re-roofs. That covers inspection time, and that covers the minimum number of inspections required. It does not cover any staff time for processing of those re-roof permits, and it does not cover any re-inspection time that may be necessary. So again, this is all tied back to an effort to recover our costs accurately and adequately without over-collecting those costs to provide the service.
So what would be the circumstance that would require a re-inspection?
I will defer to our building official, Mr. Murphy, to address that question.
When all else fails, send in the Marines. Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Good evening, Council, Honorable Mayor. So re-roof permits, like Tim said, the building inspection staff does all of the inspections related to, we're inspecting for code compliance and things like that. So if we go out for a first inspection and there's a deficiency of some kind, we write a correction notice and we have to go back and do another inspection. So instead of the roofing permit taking 2 inspections, which is typical, we go out there the first time when they do the tear off or to verify that there's only 1 layer there, and then they do the recover and we do a final inspection. If there's a deficiency at some point in the process, we have to go back a 3rd time or maybe a 4th time. And those are inspections that are not accounted for in the process because we do an average, right? So we're allowed to charge an hour, which is an average. And that's what we're going by. All this is an average. If we go too high and we try to account for too many inspections, then the permits get too expensive. So we don't want to discourage people to get permits. We want the prices to be where they should be to recover costs. And that's all we're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any further conversation?
First, I want to say that you guys have great staff because you've been to my house before and everyone's always very kind that comes to my house. So thank you. And then you took me way back on tear off. I used to do my dad's paperwork when he was a foreman as a roofer. So I'm like, oh my God, tear off and rolls and kettles and like all of that. But thank you so much to staff for all of this. I know it's a lot of work and I know I ask a lot of questions. Alexis and Carrie, I think you guys worked on the finance. Like, I ask a lot of questions because I want to make sure we're not overcharging residents and what does it mean. So just so the public knows when they're saying $400,000, that's $400,000 like Councilmember Pearson was saying that we would have to take from other areas to subsidize what it took to do these permits. So it's better for our residents that we actually allocate the money where it needs to go and that people pay for the permits they're getting. I paid for mine. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the additional financials. I really appreciate it.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, do I have a motion on this item?
There we go. Sorry. As detailed in the staff report, I move to adopt the resolution amending the 2022-23 cost allocation plan and schedule of the city fees with the following changes. Amending page 216 of the cost allocation plan to add the phrase unless otherwise noted in per pool and per spa as described in staff's presentation tonight.
We have a first.
I'll second that.
And a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. It passes. Thank you, staff. We will move into business items. Item E1, an informational report on Chromium-6, and I'll turn it to staff. Miki.
We're live. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and staff. For the public, my name is Miki Tsubota. I'm the Director of Public Works. The item before you tonight is about Chromium-6. By my count of my own staff report, I believe there's about a dozen different acronyms. It's pretty technical, so I do want to boil this down to just 3 simple things to summarize, and that pun was fully intended. So I do want to talk about what Chromium is, Chromium as it relates to water quality standards, and then finally Chromium as it relates to water quality specifically here in Brentwood. So what is Chromium? Chromium is a natural element. You can mine it out of geologic formations. In a pure form, it's metallic. It's used to mix with other metals. The most common is probably when you mix chromium with steel. And you get stainless steel. So stainless steel gets its properties specifically from chromium. I was looking around the council chambers. I don't see a lot of stainless steel in here, but I'm sure it exists. It exists at your home in your typical pots and pans. Actually, this binder clip is stainless steel, so I got some chromium here. This is an old water bottle I got from the city. I believe this is stainless steel as well. So chromium is used throughout our life. As a compound, chromium exists in what's called various oxidation states. And you'll oftentimes see it referenced as chromium-1, chromium-2, chromium-3, depending on its oxidation states, and it goes up to, I believe, 6 or even higher. The most common forms of chromium compound are chromium-3, or trivalent chromium, and chromium-6, which is hexavalent chromium. One thing to note about oxidation states of chromium is that depending on various natural and artificial chemical means, the oxidation state of chromium can change from one to the other. Chromium-3 and chromium-6 are very different. Chromium-3 is naturally occurring in many foods, fruits, vegetables, oatmeal, apparently, shellfish, seafood. Here in the U.S., it's recognized as an essential nutrient. Whether or not it's essential is not necessarily agreed to worldwide, but it is a nutrient. I actually went to Safeway, and you can actually buy chromium supplements. So this is a chromium-3 supplement from Safeway for $11. It's listed as a dietary supplement, essential minerals, and I didn't realize this earlier, but there's a warning on here not to be used by pregnant or nursing women and keep out of the reach of children. So you can buy chromium-3 supplements to consume. I have not taken one. Unlike chromium-3, chromium-6 is very different. It is toxic. It is a carcinogen. And for those of you who may recall the movie Erin Brockovich, back in 2000, I believe, starring Julia Roberts, it's a great movie, but that is I want to make sure I get it. It's based on a true story of groundwater contamination near Hinckley, California, and the pollutant in question was hexavalent chromium or chromium-6. So that's what chromium is. Now, as it relates to water quality standards, The staff report, I talk about federal standards and state standards. And for simplicity, I'm only going to talk about state standards because state standards are always going to be as stringent, if not more stringent, than federal standards. That's just how we work in California and in most states. So the unit of measurement for Chromium-6 or any chromium in water is parts per billion. To give a sense of what that's like, I had to Google this. It's basically equivalent. 1 part per billion is like 1 drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So that's the order of magnitude we're talking about when we're talking about chromium in water. Now, the state, when we talk about does our drinking water meet state standards, what it's really asking is, does our drinking water meet what's called the maximum contaminant level, the MCL? We want to make sure that our water levels are at or below the maximum contaminant level. Some of you may remember last year I gave an analogy, and the best analogy I could think of is our report card. You know, what is a report card for our water quality? And the MCL tells us whether or not we got a good grade or not. Now, the staff report, I also do talk about a public health goal. That's another standard. To tie it to the analogy, a public health goal is basically equivalent to extra credit. It is not required by the state. It's encouraged by the state and others for us to try to achieve public health goals, but it's not mandated. The public health goal for Chromium-6 in California is 0.02 parts per billion. The MCL, the maximum contaminant level for all chromium. So right now, we are required to measure all chromium in water. So that's adding chromium 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The MCL for all forms of chromium is 50 parts per billion. Several years ago, the state recognized that we should probably set up an MCL specifically for Chromium-6, especially given its toxicity and carcinogenity. The state had come up with an MCL specifically for Chromium-6 at 10 parts per billion. This was probably 9-10 years ago. The state was sued by, I believe it was the Taxpayers Association and the manufacturing industry. And the state basically, the courts basically told the state, hey, you can't set up or establish an MCL of 10 parts per billion without doing an economic feasibility analysis. So fast forward to today, the state has completed their economic feasibility analysis, and in their draft regulations, they are proposing to reestablish an MCL of 10 parts per billion for Chromium-6. The state is in the middle of what they're called the rulemaking process. It should take another year or so. This process will involve public outreach and meetings for people to provide comment on whether or not they think 10 is too high, too low. We will be monitoring that process to find out ultimately what gets adopted. So that's Chromium as it relates to water quality standards. So how are we doing here in Brentwood? So this is a 11 by 17 printout of our water quality report. This is our report card, basically. So we mail this to all our customers. It's available in English and in Spanish. It's available on our website. We have historical information of our report, so you can see last year and the previous year and so forth. A lot of the language on this report card or this report is mandated by the state. To the front of the narrative, it talks about where we get our water and common contaminants. Here in Brentwood, we get about 85% of our water from the Delta, and the remainder comes from wells. The back of the report card is kind of the meat and potatoes of the actual report card. And one of the items on here you'll notice, and it's hard to see because the font's really small, but one of the things we test for, again, is total chromium. Maximum contaminant level, 50 parts per billion. And what we got for our surface water was no detect. So we were unable to detect chromium or total chromium. And then our wells range from 4 to around 9 part per billion. Keep in mind, that's total chromium. Now, I'm sure you guys are aware last year, there was some public concern specifically about Chromium-6 in our water. So we had our staff go out, do a grab sample, and send it out for testing. And Chromium-6 levels in our surface water were no detect. And from our wells, it ranged from 4 to about 7 parts per billion. So keep in mind that if the state were to ultimately adopt an MCL of Chromium-6 at 10 parts per billion, we would still meet that standard. I think that pretty much concludes my presentation. I do want to highlight 3 things in conclusion. The first, and this is important, we have and we will continue to, or we have and we do meet all federal and state standards for drinking water quality. The second thing is that water quality standards are always changing and evolving. And I'm not just talking about for Chromium-6. There are other things that the state is looking into to regulate, to make changes to regulation. So we are always monitoring everything related to water quality besides just Chromium-6. And then finally, if anyone has any doubt about the confidence about the information I'm providing, this is a bottle of water. This is Brentwood water. I drink this every day I'm here at work, and I turned out fine. So thank you. I welcome any comments from council.
Any questions, clarifying questions?
I have a clarifying question. One, I want to thank you for a dynamic presentation. I feel like I was in a science lab today, and it was just well presented. So thank you. I want to thank Ms. Bishop for presenting this and bringing this and caring enough about our residents and our children to bring this. One of the things that Ms. Bishop raised was that she stated, and when she came before us, that there was no mention of and I saw in the report other likelihoods of how we can get cancer before we get cancer from Chromium-6 or other types of diseases. But one thing she brought up was stomach cancer and the likelihood of getting it. Do you have any ideas in Hinckley what the chromium amounts were there when their well water was tested? Because I know here, I think the main concern is the well water that keeps coming up.
Right. Yeah, I have not researched the levels in Hinckley.
Okay. Thank you.
I do have a question, Miki. What would, and I know this is going to have to be a very big ballpark because prices and costs, and some of this may not even be a process that exists. What would be the cost or the process to reduce or eliminate Chromium-6 from our well water system?
That is a good question.
I thought it was.
It actually, and I don't have an answer. It may be cheaper to, if you're considering looking at costs to remove chromium from our well water, it may be cheaper to shut down the wells and use and treat more surface water. But I don't know for sure. We haven't done that analysis.
So that leads to my second question. What would be the overall result or cost to the user or the reduction in water availability if we were to do just that?
Again, I don't have an answer to that. Now, we are in the midst of doing our rate study for water, wastewater, and solid waste under the assumption that we are still using groundwater. So if that's something you want us to look at, we can certainly look at that.
I have one more question. What would that cost in staff to do that? And I understand cost is only one component of the enormous workload that you currently do with not enough staff, frankly. So I'm not asking that this is done. I'm just wanting a ballpark of what we might be looking at.
I can do one better. I can give you a ballpark of it'll be significantly less than the ballpark rough cost of having a system like reverse osmosis or some of the other items I mentioned in the staff report, which are on the order of tens, if not low hundreds of millions of dollars to construct.
Okay, thank you. You answered all my questions. I appreciate it.
And I've got one, and that is, do you know of any environmental health safety groups that are advocating for the reduction of allowed levels of chromium-6 in the state?
I ran into several, and these can just be available online. So if you just Google, you'll see there are several groups and organizations advocating for lowering the MCL for chromium-6.
And are they targeting a specific number?
I don't know if they're targeting specific numbers. Now, the state looked at different MCLs as part of their economic and feasibility analysis, ranging from, I believe, 1, 2, 5, 10. I believe it went as high as 25. But they basically came to a conclusion that 10 is the best number.
Okay, thank you.
One quick question. When you were Googling stuff, what other item, I mean, this isn't the only thing that is in our water that people are concerned about, right? But I mean, I guess there's other things. It's which one would you choose if it was your company? Would you choose to invest to remove, not just the chromium-6, because there's a lot of things that people want removed. Would you choose to remove it as a subject matter expert? I mean, you drank the water, so that I think
I have 100% confidence in our water quality as it is right now.
Thank you.
But you are correct. There are other things the state's looking at. There are like forever chemicals, microplastics, and a bunch of chemicals that I cannot pronounce that they're still looking at.
Yeah, I think that the state's probably going to force us to do other things that we're going to have to look at down the road.
Possibly, yes.
Okay, if there are no further clarifying questions of staff.
I'm sorry, I have one.
Okay.
So the water, the recycled water that we're putting back into the parks, the purple water, I don't know what else to call it, that we're watering the parks and trying to water the schools and watering all of our infrastructure with, what's the chromium-6 level of that?
We did, the grab sample we took last fall was less than 1 part per billion.
Okay. If we continue to water all of our parks and everybody else with that water, is that water eventually going to seep into our wells, creating the problem, or creating an even bigger problem with the well water?
Highly unlikely. The wells that we get our drinking water for actually go below the, I don't know the exact term, but the water that percolates from the surface usually stays within the top layers of the soil. I don't know how deep that is, but and we know the limit of that contamination because we have some of our older wells that we've shut down that have got arsenic and some of the pesticides that you commonly see in agricultural areas. The wells that we get our drinking water go much deeper than those.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, at this time, we will open public comment. Margaret?
If you're in person, please file a speaker's card with the form provided on the counter at the back of the chambers. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And no comments were received on this prior to the meeting. I do have 3 hands raised. I will go ahead and start with Carolina Villaseca. Carolina, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I do like the Google a lot. Quote, what were the average hexavalent chromium levels in the Hinckley recorded at? The average, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, hexavalent chromium levels in the Hinckley were recorded as 1.19 parts per billion, with an estimated peak of 20 parts per billion. Based on the PG&E background study, the PG&E Topok compressor station averaged 7.8 parts per billion and peaked at 31.8 parts per billion. And this was February 22nd, 2022. So that was like so much higher, so much higher, which is why people got stomach cancer, because they were drinking the water, showering with the water, washing dishes with the water, et cetera, and of course, drinking the water. So we're nowhere near that. And even if you drowned yourself in water every day in Brentwood for the rest of your life, you would never even hit the 1.19 parts per billion per Google. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rod. Rod, go ahead.
Thank you, Margaret. So I wasn't really planning to speak on this tonight, so I'm not prepared because the research I did was a little while ago, but I did take an interest in this when it was first mentioned in an agenda prior. And I wasn't sure what it was all about. So I went and looked it up. I found an article, I think it was from Cal Cities actually. At any rate, they talked about the Chromium-6 and getting it down to 0.02 parts per billion, or at least lower than the recommended standard of 10. When I say recommended, it's the one that was going to be the standard, and then the state got sued out of having it, right? But when they were looking at mitigation measures to get the Chromium-6 out of the water, one of the methods that they were proposing to use, and I think Miki mentioned it briefly, was reverse osmosis, and they were doing it at people's houses. And this would be like a situation where there's a small community and their water source is a well, and trying to treat a massive amount of water to get all of that out, because it's such a fine trace amount, it actually ended up making more sense to put reverse osmosis at people's houses. And I think and don't quote me on this, but I think the amount that it ended up costing the water customers would be about $30 a month. So it's not trivial, but it's not undoable. And the reason it kind of caught my interest is because I have reverse osmosis under my sink. And my understanding is a lot of houses in Brentwood, because for a while they were requiring salt-based water softeners back in the day. A lot of people have those. They were required to be put in. And so I would say that something the city could do that might be a reasonable cost would just be to one, research how much it would cost for individual homeowners to put in their own reverse osmosis, at least for their drinking water, which could be a couple $100. I think the system I just bought a few years ago was not much more than that, maybe 300 at the most. But and maybe just recommend to people, because I know that some people are not going to want to pay and accelerate a higher rate for their water for Chromium-6, and other people would be happy to. So I just think that's one possible solution that we could look at, is recommending a suitable filter. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Holly Bishop. Holly, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Hinckley's levels were 1.16 to 20, and our well levels are close to that. They're at 4.6 to 6.7. So just to let you know, if somebody's living next to a well, they're going to have substantially higher rates of Chromium-6. With all due respect, Miki, I believe you all have reverse osmosis in your council chamber's water. So reverse osmosis, the reason I requested to turn off the wells is that reverse osmosis is easily going to cost us $150 million. Some say $350 million. It's easier for us to turn off the wells. Council Member Meyer, to answer your question, California groups, and I'll send you these in an email, are targeting the health goal, which we maintain at all of our water, a health goal of 0.02. So again, everything that we have on our water, our well, we don't have benzene, but our ammonia, what I'm saying is we maintain a health goal for all of for everything regarding our water, except the Chromium-6 for our wells. In regards to the soil, what I'm saying is that when you recycle water necessarily, right, in parks, for future generations, if somebody wanted to build a well there, there could be an issue for that. So that's why I was bringing the concern to that. Plus, these kids are playing in it. And the recycled water that they're watering, it has something of 0.18, but if we continue adding 0.18, what would be the repercussions of that? If the wells, so again, I was just asking if we could test continue to test the Chromium-6 yearly. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close public comments, move into council discussion, and if there's no further discussion, do I have a motion?
As detailed in the staff report, accept the informational report.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous.
Mayor Bryant?
Yes.
Before we move on to the next item, on behalf of Tim, who unfortunately is not here this evening, going to embarrass Miki a little bit. I think as the mayor and council member know, this is Mr. Tsubota's last evening with us here at the city as he's moving on to another position. And I think tonight demonstrated every reason why we're going to miss Miki, right? His analogies, his props, his ability to simplify complex matters for staff, elected officials, and residents to understand is just amazing. And so we want to wish Mr. Tsubota well. And we know we'll continue to see him and continue to work with Mr. Tsubota. But I at least wanted to take this opportunity to thank him for his 10 years with the city, 7 as the Director of Public Works, and his leadership and management in that department has been absolutely amazing, stunning, and I'm sure many of the council members feel the exact same way.
I do want to also say, and I've noticed over time dealing with very talented people that they are the last ones that will tell you how talented they are. But a while back, a few years ago, I think now, I walked into a room here during lunchtime, and I know many of you know I was a professional musician for many years, and so I know what good music sounds like, and I know the dedication that it takes to be able to reach a certain skill level. And I thought someone had put a radio back playing a piece of classical music on the violin, and I walked around the corner, and it was Miki playing eloquently, and it was stunning and just added to my appreciation at the multifaceted talents and skills that he has. And Miki, you are so going to be missed around here. We greatly appreciate you and wish you all the best.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor working for the city. Thank you.
I just want to say I'm married to a man who's been in hazardous waste recycling for our entire marriage of 30 plus years. And so your enthusiasm for your world waste management is kind of familiar to me, but my husband doesn't typically come with props. So I got to give you that. Sorry, honey. I'm truly amazed every time you present at the enthusiasm with which you do that and the way you bring everyone into your world, and you make us actually want to have the mayor hold that pile of, what was the brown? Biochar. The biochar. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to see the mayor holding that. Based on how all of this is working together, your team is fantastic. You're fantastic. You will be missed. And thank you for the entertainment and education, because that's important too.
And Miki, I want to say thank you for all of your patience before I was on council and now that I'm on council. And just the different, like you were saying, he's multifaceted, like the different subjects, like you go from garbage to water to roads. And, you know, it's so thank you for everything. I appreciate it. I'm excited for you. Like I told you, I change jobs like every 2 years. So I always love a new adventure. So I wish you all the best in your new adventure. And don't be shy. You can come to any council meeting anytime you'd like.
I have to join in with my colleagues. I feel jaded that you're leaving as soon as I sit in this seat. I have a bucket of tears, especially after your presentation. It was amazing. And I have to say to the chief of police, when we did our tours as new council members, you were at the top of the list. And then I went to our water facility. And I've never been so happy to be around waste
the enthusiasm that was presented by both of our members of our city was so amazing that they now have you beat. So thank you. Thank you so much for your service. And hopefully you come back because 3 times a charm.
Well, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't add in. Thank you so much for all of your time that you spent with us. I've spent a majority of my life teaching, and I know that's not what you're going to do, but when you explain something that is way out there, the biochar and everything else, and you can make a dumb old cop like me understand what you're talking about, you should move into being a teacher. You do a phenomenal job of explaining and making it very fun. Truly appreciate you, and you're going to be missed. Thank you.
At this time, we'll move into item E4. This is an update on the Civic Center's parking structure charging station fee program. And turn to the staff. Is this Michelle? It's been so long since we got to be in the same room and hear from you. Thanks, Michelle.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Last September, the City Council approved a fee structure for the use of the city's electric vehicle charging stations located in City Hall parking garage. As a part of that approval, the City Council directed staff to come back to the Council with an update once 3 months of data were available. We are here tonight for that check-in. Prior to November of last year, the city offered free use of the City Hall parking garage EV stations. All costs were borne by the general fund. Over the years, the costs and usage of the EV stations increased, resulting in the charging stations frequently being full, and the general fund picking up $40,000 in annual costs. In September of last year, the City Council approved a fee structure consisting of a usage fee of 25 cents per kilowatt hour, along with a $3 per hour parking fee. The parking fee is only charged when vehicles remain in the stations after 4 hours. This fee was designed to discourage users from leaving vehicles in the station when they were no longer being charged. The new fees went into effect on November 1st, and so as such, we have 3 months worth of data to analyze. On this slide, we are presenting information from the most recent 3 months, November through January on the left, with the comparative information from the prior year, November through January on the right. We use the same months in the comparison to avoid issues with vacations and holidays skewing the data. In summary, usage at the stations has decreased significantly. As you can see, the average session length and number of sessions dropped by approximately 50%. The number of vehicles parked while not charging dropped substantially from 168 vehicles to only 4. This has really helped free up space and capacity. The total amount of energy pulled from the system dropped from about 27,000 kilowatt hours to about 8,000. And the quarterly general fund subsidy fell from about $6,600 to $600. And on an annual basis, staff estimates a general fund savings of approximately $36,000 at the current pricing structure, as costs would decline from $40,000 to about $4,000. On this slide, you can see the rates charged at nearby local agencies. We checked for any updates since our fee adoption, and the comparison rates were unchanged. The city's fee continues to be comparable to other agencies. The per kilowatt hour fee can be increased by CPI in the next cost allocation plan, although it would likely only be about a penny, and staff is likely to recommend waiting until we have a full year of data before making further upward revisions. We will report on this in the next cost allocation plan update this fall. And this concludes my report. At this time, I will turn the time back to the mayor for any discussion and potential direction to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any clarifying questions?
I just have one question. Have we received any negative comments?
There have not been any comments posted on the website.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If there are no further clarifying questions of staff, we'll open public comments. Margaret?
If you're in person, please file a speaker card. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And I received no comments on this item prior to the meeting, and I have no hands raised in Zoom and no speaker cards in person.
Okay, at this time, we'll close public comment, move into council discussion.
I just want to say it's amazing because, I mean, people used to wait for those spots and they are empty. So like, where are they? Like, I mean, they must be charging at home, but it's great savings to the rest of the city. So they get about 36,000 back. So thank you.
And I would agree. I think it's, I know there was some speculation that there might be actually some revenue generated from this, but I'm actually really happy at the way it's turned out, especially because there isn't any negative feedback from the public. And I have to comment, I love the way you presented because you look like a librarian holding a book, speaking in a very gentle way to a group of students. I kept getting distracted by that style. I love that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I also agree. I think the $36,000 in savings that is expected will be appreciated. That will go directly to something else that our community can use positively. And just on a personal resident thought, I would prefer not to pay someone else to charge their vehicle from my hard-earned money. And so I appreciate this. I think we're on the right track. So do I have a motion on this item?
As detailed in the staff report, I accept, request that we accept the update.
We have a first.
I'll second.
And a second. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? It is unanimous. We'll move into requests for future agenda items. If you have item F1, if you have a new agenda request, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Seeing none, we will move into item F2.1. And Council Member Mendoza and Pearson, would you like to explain your request? Let me read that. The future agenda item request from Council Member Mendoza and Council Member Pearson for City Council discussion of and possible direction to staff related to the joint use of school district facilities for a variety of activities for youth.
Yeah, this came about, we've been discussing for years what to do with the youth and giving them other, not to do what with them, but what can we find for them to do? So, you know, we've talked about things like youth centers and I mean, unless we get Measure X, there's really no way we can afford one right now, or unless we get a major sponsor. I don't see that happening. And then when we were at the soccer complex, sports complex meeting, and sitting at our table was a woman who uses our facilities for tennis, and we are very limited on tennis courts. And that's when we all started talking about the joint usage program that we have with the schools. And I think it was Mr. Elam who said that the vision was that we would have mini youth centers at the schools, like, you know, around the cities so that kids could get around. So I just want to go back and I want to understand what the agreements say. I want to know how we can exercise the agreements, how we can build park and rec programs such as the tennis, where she said she'll have like a wait list of like 100 kids every summer. How do we just start implementing those and using them to the fullest of whatever the agreement says we can? So that's what I would like to see.
And I think I would piggyback on that one. It was, for me, this became a big issue because one of the big things is our youth programs. And this became a big issue when we had our theater presented. Well, not our theater, but the land that we currently own that, you know, we have a lease that was being presented for at Bristow. And I thought we have the right to usage of many of our school facilities. We have a joint relationship with our schools. Why not use what we have while we're trying to discover? One of the considerations that came up while we're waiting for possible funding for the facility that's out near the police department is the distance to it. And so I would have to agree with Councilmember Mendoza. Instead of us trying to reinvent the wheel and create this whole new purpose of one big youth facility, our youth are very diverse in what they like. So why not utilize what we have to have theater activities, to have tennis, to have soccer at the facilities and basketball, yes, and other things for our students that we do provide in our summer activities, which is great by Parks and Rec, but to extend those to year long for activities that are organized. We also have several organizations that independently do activities for our youth. And some of the things that they run into is usage of facilities. Where do they go? I've had one nonprofit organization looking for, well, I want to do all these things, but I just don't know where to go. And the cost to rent it as a private organization or even a nonprofit is so much. So if we can align with those organizations, I think that and to provide these resources, I think it would be great for us. I know that there are like some of the organizations even sitting on the PAL meeting. There are PALs doing a bunch for our youth, taking it out of PAL resources to make sure that our youth have after school activities. But I think that that's something that we can do as a city. So PAL can use those resources we can partner with organizations like PAL. So that being said, I absolutely want to find out more about our joint use contracts, to find out more about timing and availability and resources so that we can develop a full encompassing plan so that it could be something that we don't just talk about every time we come to council, but it's something that we can put into action so our youth have more activities to do. And when I talk about our youth, I'm talking about, TK all the way up until, beyond high school.
Thank you. At this time, we will open public comments. Margaret?
If you're in person, please file a speaker card. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. No public comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. I do have one hand raised. I'll call on Carolina Villaseca. Carolina, go ahead.
Hi. Yes, one of the things, and this is further down, but I just want to put it out there, is that when you have either private groups or things sponsored by the city that take place on school property, in the agreements that you draft, there needs to be a line item that if something gets broken during the use, during the program, that has to be paid for and replaced. So that when school starts and those facilities are needed by the schools, then whatever was broken, defaced, whatever, is in good working order. I agree that this is very necessary. And I think, I'm thinking Bristow, the brand new theater, it is gorgeous. It is awesome. They provide, as an example, microphones. And if a summer program comes in and they break the microphones, they are, I forget how, I think they're like $1,000 each. Then that program, whether it be the city or a private program, needs to replace those microphones. So when school starts in the fall, the students who would like to put on a play and practice have the microphones for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised.
Okay, at this time, we'll close public comments, move into council discussion.
Yeah, I would like to say it's a no-brainer. It's certainly something that, this discussion has been developing for a long time, as Councilmember Mendoza said. It's one part of a larger plan that if this angle doesn't work, we work on this angle instead. We're just building as we go to have as robust a set of services for our our kids and our young adults as we can possibly put together. We've been actively working on our youth resources guide, if you will, and I think that there's some overlap here with that as well. I absolutely support the idea. Like I said, it's not a new idea, but it needed to be brought back so that we could give it the full attention, because the direction is changing as we go, and we discover what's going to work and what isn't. So yeah, I absolutely support it.
I think that it's a phenomenal idea using a resource we already have, but part of it with that PAL's experiencing right now is because of COVID and because everything was shut down for that long period of time, they're having a hard time getting back up and running again. This would give even the PAL organizations and the organizations that already exist in Brentwood another resource to have activities. I mean, PAL's looking for golf or bowling We can play basketball. They can go do things at the schools. So it opens up a lot of other options for organizations that already exist here in Brentwood. Great idea.
Yeah, I have to say it was disheartening this summer. I signed my child up who is 13, 12 at the time, for a basketball camp. And the resource that was available was in Antioch. And this is no jab at Antioch. But I had to pull him out because it was done on a hard asphalt surface that had broken glass on the ground. And as a parent, I thought, we're on the campus on a high school campus. Why don't we have the availability to enter into the campus to provide this large group of students the opportunity to play on the wood? So, I think that all kids should have access to good facilities. And I agree, we need to make sure we take care of our facilities. And I think we do a good job at drafting contracts in which we, make sure that things are taken care of. So that's not my biggest concern. But I do think we need to be able to provide extended access for our youth. So, yeah.
Okay, if there's no further conversation regarding this.
And I know you're already working on some of it, like the lock at the tennis court. So you're already on it. I just think it's bringing it forward. But, I know you're already working on some of it. And
do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to have staff time and money spent to research our joint use agreements.
Okay, we have a first.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Councilmember Mendoza, could you be clear on what you would like brought back?
I would like
part of it?
I would like to see the agreement and what's available, and then from there we can then talk about what programs we can use. Right now we don't even know what facilities we can use. So I think first let's figure out what the agreements say, what's available, and then we'll go to look at other things.
And I'm going to expand on that request. I think when you say what's available, are you asking for a list of all availability for all schools in the city of Brentwood and what the contracts say as far as our usage, right?
Yeah, I want to see the agreements.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Second, put your hand back.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. Moving to item F2.2, future agenda item request from Councilmember Mendoza for City Council discussion of and possible direction to staff related to the possible creation of a policy for employees who may wish to submit non-employment related comments to the City Council, whether one-on-one or via public comment options.
Yeah, this one came up because I did get a call from someone who was afraid to speak to me about something that's not related to their job, but is related to the city. And I felt like that's an infringement on their free speech. So I don't know if it's in the handbook or what it is, but just something in your employee handbook that makes it a safe place if they want to reach out to us, just like any other resident would, or if they want to speak at the podium, just like any other resident would, as long as it's not their job related, right? We don't want people like, hey, I'm working 60 hours a week. Like, I can't do anything about that because I don't get involved in that kind of stuff. But if they have suggestions for the city or, they see an agenda item about a development and they want to give feedback, I've had people say, I feel like I can't speak on it. So I just want to make it a safe place and they don't have to go talk to their upper management about it. They can just come here, end of story, and they should never be questioned about it and feel intimidated that they can't speak.
Okay, at this time, we'll open public comment.
If you'd like to speak and you're in person, please file a speaker's card. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And no public comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. And I have no speaker cards and no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will close public comment, move into council discussion.
I would like to say I support this 100%. We have had in the past when there was a development or a project that's a big concern across the city, people have actually emailed us from a spouse or family member's email address because they wanted to make a comment, but they were unsure what the reception would be. So regardless of whether this is already in place or not, we have people feeling that it's not encouraged or it's not safe. So I think it needs to be a little bit more proactive in the way we talk to staff and say that, yes, you are permitted. In fact, you are encouraged as a resident of Brentwood to speak your mind and to share your feedback. And I think it's just a matter of, like I said, just communications with it and transparency.
Being a former employee of the city of Brentwood, I've never felt that I couldn't come to city council as long as it had nothing to do with the police department. And I think making sure that that is 100% understood as a citizen, I'm supporting this development. Absolutely. They have every right as a resident of Brentwood, but I just don't want to get into that point where employees are coming to council and then we're getting stuck in the middle of, yeah, but I went to Councilman Orlemans and he said, and then it becomes this huge issue. Well, now that we're not getting raises because I went to council, I think we get into a slippery slope of making sure they understand, the employees, that it is 100% as every other resident in the city. It has nothing to do with your employment with the city.
Clearly I'm in support of our employees having access to us for non-work related things. Again, First Amendment. I lived it. I love it. It's absolutely essential. But I do also agree that my concern is this, and I am in support of this, clearly, this idea that they can approach and talk to us about their concerns. My concern is very similar to Councilman Orleman's concern, and that is I don't want any of the council members to be put in a situation where we have to try to make a legal call of what is work-related, what's personal. And so I don't know how to do that, but thankfully that isn't my job. And I just would like to, if Damien could give us some clarity on maybe how to ask for what we need to ask for, the best way to ask for it, that would be helpful.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I don't have an answer for you tonight on that question. As you know, this item is to spend staff and time resources to look into it, and so I haven't done any research on it in advance of this meeting. What I would obviously do is work with our Human Resources Department, our City Manager's Office, and outside legal counsel experienced in personnel matters and human resources matters to see what our options are there, because it is a balance. You know, the employees obviously have First Amendment rights to speak on different topics, but there's also the city manager, city council form of government where the council is limited on certain things they can interact with employees on. And I think Councilmember Mendoza, in your request, you took that into account. But that is something we still need to guard against. And so those are some of the issues we'd be looking at based on, you know, the discussion you're having right now. But for me to give you an answer, Mr. Mayor, on what exactly to ask, I don't know those answers, you know, at least right now, not until we start looking into it.
Okay, but the request is clear as far as...
I'm looking over at our HR director because she'll be taking a large part of this along with my office. So I want to make sure she's clear on the request.
Yes, I am clear on the request.
Okay. Thank you. Then go ahead.
Oh,
yes.
I just wanted to add, as the one council person that didn't speak on this, I agree. I think this is just simply saying that we put a policy in place or a procedure to say you have the right to talk to council members just like any other member of the community. And I think this goes, for me, it goes back to the need for a clear governance that's not just about governance of just the council, but overall governance between council, the relationship between council and city employees and members of the staff, where we can all sit in a room and understand the relationship and make it clear, and it gets matriculated down to all staff members, but it also is reinforced by a policy or procedure that's put in place.
Okay, do I have a motion? I'm sorry.
Before the motion is made, just one clarifying question, probably of the maker of the motion and of the council. I heard a number of you express comments about employees who are residents have the right to speak. There was a lot of focus on the residential nature of it. Are you limited to that, or are you expanding it to
No, I
just
think that's
employees?
against free speech.
But that's what I was hearing, so I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
No, I think I'd like to make a motion to have time and staff spend time and money and resources to review a policy so that employees can come and speak to us about anything they like, except for job-related items. So if it's about your job, if it's about your pay, that is all done, in closed session or with HR, that we can't get involved in that. So I think we could probably, so that's what I'd like you to spend time on, if that makes sense.
And I will second if that's enough.
I'm just looking over at our.
She's
HR
thinking,
director.
yeah, so I'm looking at Sakari.
And also to our assistant city manager.
So can I ask a clarifying question, Councilmember Mendoza? The way that you described that motion, it makes me think that it might not be about their position, but it could be about someone else's position in the city. So I don't know if you were trying to distinguish between those two, but at least the way that I heard you say it.
It could be about anything they want to talk to us about. Like they've heard this or they feel this or, whatever they would like to talk to us about, even agenda items or, whatever they're seeing around the city or, there's too much gum on the sidewalk, whatever it is, if it's not their job related, they should be able to come to us. I mean, they could go out to lunch and go, why is there gum every 3 steps or something, right? No one's taking care of it. You should think about spending money on that or whatever. So does that clarify my motion?
I would say no, not fully.
I think I'm understanding your question is that what if somebody comes to us and says, I'm reaching out to you because staff member Bob is afraid to talk to you, but I will talk to you on his behalf.
That's a perfect example of what I was trying to describe.
So one employee coming on behalf of another employee?
So that is a job-related issue that an employee would then be discussing with you, which is an item that I think that's the...
No, that would be an HR-related issue, okay. And I would refer them right back to Sakari.
Great.
And I'll still second.
I think we're assuming that's an HR-related issue.
Great.
If one employee wanted to say, I don't like the way the flag is hung or there's gum on the sidewalk, and they are afraid to tell us and they have someone else, then it necessarily, so it just is open to...
But if they're talking about an employee is what we're talking about. If not anything about the city ops.
Let me finish. If one person A says, person B has an issue with gum all over the streets and I just want to come bring it to you, not a employment related question, then we're free to hear that they're speaking on someone's behalf. And my question, my answer would be, that's not a big deal to me. So yes, they should be able to just talk, even if it's for someone else.
Yeah.
And I think my question was just more related to employee related issues.
Yeah.
So I'm clear.
Like if I don't like that person or I don't like the way they're doing their job performance.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about, not that. Yeah. So yeah, I don't want job performance is job related. Those go back to Sakari. And I think we could quickly see if something was job related, right? Like, yeah, no, they come in late every day. That's not my issue. That's time management. That's her issue.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I have the motion.
We have a first and a second.
And based on, just to clarify, based on the clarifications you heard, Vice Mayor Meyer, you're
Yes.
satisfied with the...
I'm still satisfied, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Item F2.3, future agenda item request from Councilmember Mendoza for City Council discussion of and possible direction to staff related to an update on scholarships.
This one, I'm not sure why it's coming back because we talked about this a couple of years ago and we were supposed to work on our scholarships for the kids and how are we communicating those out. I don't know if you remember that, but we talked about this when we were talking about Park and Rec and all of the programs. So I guess maybe just an update on what's going on with our scholarships. How are they being communicated out? I've had parents actually ask me about it and I'm like, oh, I thought like it goes through the schools, but I just need to understand how the scholarships are working. How are we communicating? Who is eligible and all of that good stuff.
Before we take further clarification, so I have a question. Are you pulling the request and just requesting a staff report on this?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's all. We just want an update. Yeah, what's going on? What's the latest? Some data on that. How many kids have gotten them over the last couple of years? All that. We just want to know what's going on because I'm hearing people don't know about it. So I just want to hear people say they don't know about it, but I want to know, okay, how many kids are getting them year over year? How are we communicating it out? Is it really that they're not hearing about it? Was it just their school? I mean, I know we've talked about it quite a few times.
Damien?
It'd be appropriate to take public comment at this point, Mr. Mayor, and
That
then
was my
engage
question.
in council discussion.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll open public comment.
If you're in person, please file a speaker card. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And no public comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. I do have one hand raised. I'll call on Carolina Velaseca. Carolina, go ahead.
Hi, welcome. Yeah, I have kids in school, and I can tell you that 2 different schools, and no communication has come through Peach Jar, which is where all the flyers go, about scholarships, because then I would have turned around and sent that information to people I know that would really benefit from that for their kids. So however that communication is going out to the schools, it is not getting to the parents via Peach Jar. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised and no additional speaker cards.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close public comment. And the request has been made. Is it possible, Bruce, to have this process done this way, or do we need to take a vote, Damien, for?
I think, Mr. Mayor, it would be appropriate just to take a vote to authorize staff and resources to be spent on presenting or preparing an update to the council on the scholarship programs.
Okay. Is there any further conversation, or do I have a motion?
Motion to spend staff time and resources on updating us on scholarship processes and how many kids have gotten them over the last couple of years and how we can communicate, how we are communicating, and then we can talk about how to communicate better.
I second that motion.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Moving into item F2.4, future agenda item request from Councilmember Mendoza for City Council discussion of and possible direction to staff related to the possible sponsorship of sports fields at Sunset Park Athletic Complex to fund additional sporting opportunities for disadvantaged youth.
So we don't have to do this one right now, but I think we need to think about it. I know we could probably get sponsors for Sunset and when the new complex is open. My understanding is some parks are getting about $250,000 to $500,000 for their sponsorships. So I'd like to spend time and money, especially right now that economic development is really going out and trying to find businesses. It's a great time when you're offering, like, hey, we have this business that's coming in and we have these sponsorship opportunities too. So I just wanted to keep it top of mind when we're doing things, because I don't know how the intricacies work. So that is what I'm thinking about. And yes, the funds, I would love to be able to use it for disadvantaged youth if we get to that point.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open public comment.
If you're in person, please file a speaker card. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And no public comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. And I have no hands raised and no speaker cards.
Okay, we will close public comment, move into council discussion.
I have some questions for Councilmember Mendoza. Can you tell me what cities are collecting $250,000 to $500,000?
I was told by the president of the earthquakes, that's the running rate.
That they get $250,000 to $500,000?
Yeah. He said that if you stop and think about it, he has X amount of games per year. Youth soccer fields have way more eyes on them. So it is worth more to a company to advertise on a youth soccer field.
And then I guess my only concern about this, I don't think it's a bad idea. I do need to express my concerns are how we determine
who our sponsors would be? For example, if we had a vape pen company who wanted to be a sponsor, and like how do we determine the power we want to retain when we decide on sponsorships, and what's going to be the process for us deciding who our sponsors will be, making sure also we take into consideration when we are looking at sponsors that we're choosing one and not choosing the other one to present a city that looks discriminatory. And then also, I think it's a great idea, but I would like more information on when you say disadvantaged youth, specifically if we go deeper to what disadvantaged youth specifically. I think it's a great idea. I just think it needs to be a little bit more fleshed out. And I don't know if we seek out direction from staff to tell us because you said some other cities were doing it. And so I'd like to know what other cities are doing, what's the process, and more detail, because it sounds great.
That's what I want staff to spend time and money on.
I don't want like a huge, one of the examples was, what if a weed dispensary company wants to sponsor the youth event and put a big sign up, or, something that's contrary to what our city has accepted? How do we deny one person and accept another one?
That's our job as council, to accept one and deny another. But that's what I want staff to spend time and money to work on this. And actually, it was more like you are out. If you're out and about and you find opportunities, you can bring them to council. We can talk about it. I know that someone said we used to do it, but we weren't getting that much revenue back in the day. So it's not something that's foreign to staff. It's something they've done before. But if we think that we can leverage it and help kids, I'm all for helping the kids however I can. But this is why I'm bringing it back, because we need to be able to talk about it together. And if someone comes up and says, hey, I think someone in Livermore has Monster, someone lives in Livermore that works for Monster, so they sponsor one of their fields. But if we have someone in town who has a company like, Google or whatever, and they want to sponsor it, I wouldn't want to turn money away that we could use. And I'll call it poor kids, because I was one of the kids that got scholarships when I was a kid, right? So I would love to be able to help poor kids. So,
and I think my ask was in making the next level for your ask. I'm just asking specifically, will there be an ask to specify how and process?
Yes.
Because I know what our job is to deny or accept, right? But I think for me, clarity on if we're giving direction to staff, being specific for staff to come back to us with, yes, we can do sponsorships. This is the process, and this is what we would have to.
Well, that's how future agenda items work. We give them an idea, and then I know, but you're asking me for details that I'm asking them for them to do work on it, right? If I had the details, I'd be able to present the project.
I think you don't understand my ask. I'm asking, when you make your recommendation, when you do your ask, could you include in your ask for staff to give us details? I'm not asking you for the details.
Okay, it sounded like you were asking me right now. So I guess when I say, can you spend resources for, investigating what it takes to do a scholarship? What are other people getting? Have you heard of anyone? But for me, I don't know if it was, I was talking to maybe Bruce the other day. We did it before, so maybe we can start doing it again and use those funds. I don't know. I feel like you're coming at me like sideways on this one. And it's weird. That's how I'm feeling. I'm not sure if that's the way you're sending that message, but that's how I'm feeling about it. I would like to have staff spend time and resources to research what we can do when it comes to fundraising off of our fields on sponsorships. If it works, it works. And if we get money, fantastic, we can help kids. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's okay too.
Thank you. And I'm not coming at you sideways. I don't even know if that's the terminology I would use in a professional setting. I'm just asking for you to. I'm asking.
Please, I'm going to clarify something. Please don't tell me how to speak.
I'm not
a regular
telling you how to speak, ma'am. I would like to finish my statement.
I am asking, as the chair, if we can come back. I believe the questions have been fairly clear. To staff. So before we go further with that explanation, I'm going to open for public comments regarding this item.
If you're in person, please file a speaker card with the form provided at the back of the chambers. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired, and no public comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. I do have one hand raised. Carolina, go ahead.
So I've sat on several boards where we do fundraising. I sat on one in Georgia before we moved to California. It was for my son's elementary school, and we were having a fundraiser where you put together baskets and then you auction them off. We got a store, I don't know how to put this delicately, that sold adult toys, and they wanted to put together a basket to be auctioned off at a fundraiser taking place inside an elementary school. You can imagine that we thanked the business profusely for the wanting to put a basket together from their establishment, but it being an elementary school, it would not be an appropriate basket. You can imagine the parents with their kids walking around, Mommy, Daddy, what is that in that basket? So what we ask them instead is to make a donation to the school. So there are always ways to handle sponsorships that are appropriate based on the setting without causing issues. Bad messaging to the public that is using the facility or to the age range of the people using the facility. So I'm pretty sure that city staff has a way to politely decline any sponsorship that would be looked at sideways as people walk by and see the banner. So I'm pretty sure that we can do that. I think it's been done before. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised and no additional speaker cards.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll close public comment, move into council discussion.
So I would like to finish my comment because I got cut off. I have no problems with seeking sponsorships. During the purpose first was for the presentation of what a council member, if you brought it up as a future agenda item, and it was our opportunity to ask questions. My question specifically was in support of it, will we be asking staff to give us details about how we will reject or accept? That's all I wanted. It's not to come at you sideways. And when I said that, I said, I don't feel comfortable in a professional setting saying that, not that you shouldn't say that. So I want to clarify myself that I'm specifically asking when we send the request, the staff give us a full and thorough, detailed report about how we can reject certain people, because like tonight, discrimination comes up, and I don't want one company to say we're discriminating against them or one person not to. I look at it from all perspectives, and that's what I would ask for tonight in our information that staff gives us back.
Yeah, well, in my motion, I was going to say that, but here I would ask that you don't mother me and don't tell me how to speak, please. And that's all I'm going to ask, because that's what set me off. Please do not tell me how to speak. I was elected speaking this way. I will continue to speak the way I speak. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable, but that is completely offensive that you would want to tell me how to speak.
Okay, now that we have the request and it's presented to staff, is the request clear?
If a council member would like to put that into a motion, and then I'll look to Bruce. There's been lots of discussion, and so we want to make sure that we're clear.
I would like to make a motion to have staff spend time and resources to research how we would restart our scholarship program, what it would take, is how much money do we think we can get from it, and all of that. And then once we have that, then the next step would be how do we use the funds. But if we could just detail that, just benchmark off what other cities are doing. Like I said, I think Livermore's using Monster.
Can I clarify one? You mentioned scholarship program. I think you meant sponsorship program.
Yeah, sponsorship program. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. Okay, before adjournment tonight, we do have one more. Let me get back to it. Item F2.5, future agenda item request from Councilmember Mendoza for City Council discussion of and possible direction to staff related to the reinstatement of the review process for development projects, including subcommittees prior to being scheduled for consideration by the Planning Commission and the City Council.
So a little history on this one. All of our development projects used to go to Parks and Rec and LUD, and I don't even know why this has to be on here. I don't know why it stopped. I don't know why it takes, I was talking to one other council person about it. I don't know why it takes 5 votes to start it back up, but it didn't take 5 votes to stop it. Like, it's a little confusing to me. But I think we could take care of a lot of the issues that we have by trying this again. I mean, we saw it tonight with the Trinity Estates. Had these projects gone maybe to LUD, we would have had one layer of questions before it came to planning and council. So, yeah, I just want to reinstate the process that we had before.
Okay, at this time, we'll open public comments.
If you're in person, please file a speaker card on the form provided at the back of the room. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person, and your microphone will be muted after the timer has expired. And no comments were received on this item prior to the meeting. I do have one hand raised. I'll call on Carolina Villaseca. Carolina, go ahead.
Thank you. I think this is particularly important as we're continuing to build out what little of Brentwood we have left to build out. And especially if, God forbid, we are subject to, what is it called? Builder remedy. What we want to make sure we do is that these projects definitely go through Parks and Rec and make sure that there's green space in these projects. I mean, if you have a neighborhood, obviously not tonight's example because that's just very little houses, but if you have a project, there should be a park. Even if it's a small park, any green space makes the city of Brentwood much more appealing to home buyers, especially if it's a neighborhood park. I can tell you that I'm blessed with 2 parks in my neighborhood, and my kids use that park, both of them, all the time. And it was great. You're getting under my skin, you're getting in my hair, go out to the park. Go play, get some fresh air, get out of my hair. And I just have to support this tremendously because, like I said, we're running out of land in Brentwood, and we want to make sure that whatever we have left is built the way that we need it to be built to keep Brentwood as healthy and as family friendly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no additional hands raised and no speaker cards.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close public comment, move into council discussion.
I would like to ask the question about why something that can be stopped, why a practice can be stopped without full council review, if it takes full council review to vote for something in the first place. I mean, it's a kind of a rule of thumb. Why didn't it come to us for removal?
I'm going to jump in first if I can. I don't know. I'm looking at the description of the Land Use and Development Committee, and it says the committee reviews items relating to major land use, community development, economic development, and housing policy topics. And it goes on, but it talks about major land use. It doesn't talk about all land use. I don't know when this was changed, if it has been changed, if it's something that's been there for a long time. I've been here probably longer than most, and I don't know if all items went to LUD. I don't believe they did. I think it's just depended on the nature of the items. If there were larger items, they would oftentimes go to LUD, but I don't even know if all of those went to LUD. So I don't know if there was any action that staff took that has changed something. I'm reading the policy of what it says. I think, certainly we can clarify if the council desires more items to go to LUD, that's, the LUD's description can change. There are some things the council should consider though on this, and I suspect the community development director was going to say it, and I'll start it and maybe she'll finish it. But there's new state laws out there, as the council is so well aware, including SB 330, which one of those provisions limits the number of public hearings the council can have on an item to 5. And it's not just the council, it's all of the other legislative bodies. So if it goes to the planning commission, that's 1. If it goes to the council, that's 2. Parks and Rec is 3. If any of those bodies want to hear it again, that's another hearing. And so some of these, it may be more difficult to take to LUD as much as the council may desire to go there, because that then takes away the full council's authority and ability to hear those items under the new law. And so it's something to keep in mind. I'll stop there. I'll let our community development director add whatever she wishes to add.
Once again, Negative Nelly chimes in about state laws. So I just wanted to clarify, some projects did come to LUD, not all. It wasn't a policy or a procedure that we abandoned or paused. It was really ad hoc based on staff's interpretation of what is major or controversial. So it wasn't every development project that came to LUD, and it wasn't something we set aside. It was just a practice. In 2019, SB 330 became law. And with SB 330, there's a number of restrictions, not just on the number of meetings we can have, but it also shortens the amount of time we have to process applications too. Okay, so if you add another meeting, you're adding more time to process applications. Appeals count in the 5-meeting rule. There's some debate about whether when we do those scoping meetings on EIRs and take public comment, there's some debate of whether that counts as a meeting. So again, we're trying to serve many masters and protect that 5-meeting rule. So what happens is if we have our 5th meeting and it's not the actual meeting where council makes a decision, then we may be compelled to approve that project, whether council's heard it or not. So that's why we're trying to be protective of that 5-meeting limit. There's also a lot more scrutiny on what councils and land use decision, how they're made in this state. And so if council members say something at a LUD meeting, that could be interpreted as expressing their opinion on the ultimate project. That's also fraught and potentially could be detrimental to the overall process in a way that I'm sure council would not intend, right? So there's some delicacies with how we discuss things at LUD that, not that we should have or shouldn't have done that a few years ago, but there's certainly a lot more attention paid to those types of meetings now by developers than there might have been in the past. So I'm happy to work with council to find a way to potentially bring more projects to LUD. We may not be able to deliver all that council wants on that front and still be consistent with some of those other requirements, but I'm happy to receive direction and see what would serve best for LUD, and then we can provide some feedback on how that may or may not come against all these other regulations that we're trying to meet.
Yeah, I think that okay, so number one, thank you for that. And I wish we had that conversation before. Like, I didn't realize, because I know Karen brought it up. We've brought it up, like, these things used to go LUD, these things used to go Park and Rec. I think the minute we say something like that, if there's a reason why it's not happening, the sooner we know, the better it is, right? Because then we're like, why isn't it happening? And like, why did it stop happening? So, it'd be great just to know in the future, because then we don't have to bring an agenda item or whatever. And I think I'm not going to make a motion for it, but I think if you ever think that there's a benefit to slipping us in, or the opportunity to do so, if you think like it would be better, I just keep thinking about the Trinity Estates one, which, I had seen that one. I had thought things about it. Like, it would have been nice if we would have talked about it beforehand. I just don't know. But if you think there's an opportunity to slip us in that doesn't compromise SB 330, I think that would be great.
Certainly, and also being mindful of not compromising council members' ability to deliberate on the item when it comes to the full council, right? So that's also something we try and be mindful of.
Thank you.
So my question is, are you pulling this, or should we ask for public comments? Oh, we are. I'm sorry. Okay. It's been a bouncy back and forthy schedule tonight. So we have, do we need a vote on this?
If Councilmember Mendoza, whose request this was, doesn't feel a need to make a motion at this time, no action needs to be taken.
Okay, thank you.
I do believe, did we open up public comment on this item? Okay.
No, I just want to, I thought I had heard public comment was open, but I'm checking.
Yes.
With the city clerk. Okay.
It's marked off on my sheet here, so we did. Before I ask for a motion for adjournment, there was a request to adjourn in the honor of an absolutely wonderful individual who dedicated a lot of time and care and love to our community. And Councilmember Mendoza, if you would like to introduce them.
Yes. It is with great sadness that we convey the news of Coach Cecy Martinez's passing over the weekend. Cecy meant very much to our community, a great example for others. Coach Cecy grew up playing youth soccer for Impact, varsity soccer at Liberty High School, and then collegiately with Cal State East Bay. She gave back tirelessly to our local soccer community by coaching for Impact Soccer Club for over 10 years, coaching at Liberty High School and then East County Revolution. In addition, Cecy was a Brentwood school teacher at Mary Casey Black. She believed that teaching and coaching was very similar, and her goal was always to create well-rounded players and people on and off the field. For Coach Cecy, it was teaching the children lifelong lessons such as how to be a leader or to be a follower, understanding how body language speaks volumes, and that making mistakes is okay. She worked with children to set and achieve goals, emphasizing that success requires hard work and sacrifice. Tonight, we adjourn in honoring the legacy of Coach Cecy leaves behind and support Coach Jesus and Cecy's daughter, Jordy. I move to adjourn in honor of Coach Cecy Martinez.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned.